episode of the Tetracast. This is RPG Site's weekly podcast where we get the site staff together to talk about our favorite genre of video games. We have the usual crew here today. I'm your host. My name is Brian Vitale. Joining me, I have Josh Torres,
Salutations.
Adam Vitale,
Hello.
James Glazio,
Hey, folks.
and Chow Min Woo.
Welcome back.
Welcome back, Chow. Even though I don't think you've missed a week in a long, long time.
I'm talking to James. He's been gone for a while from all this
James,
game. But
yeah, James has been our boots on the ground for like the entire summer, every other week or so. So, are you back home, James, or are you in some weird remote location now?
I'm back home. I am definitely resting up, especially since I'm going to be doing TGS next month. It's like, nah, I'm good for a bit.
So you will again be out and about and be on a dispatch mission on behalf of the
very far this time.
Yeah. First time in Japan?
Yes.
Oh, sweet.
oh, you'll love the food there. I've been there. It's like there's competition everywhere. Food quality is like God tier.
I am almost worried that it'll ruin like the Japanese places like back home. It's like, oh no.
My friend said the exact same thing. But
I think like LA ramen is like pretty up there, like comparable to ramen you'll find out there. So it won't ruin the ramen places.
This is our first podcast recording in August, and of course, the big game release of the week, of the month, really is Baldur's Gate 3. So Baldur's Gate 3, of course, was originally scheduled to come out at the very end of the month, but was recently moved up for its PC release to release just last Thursday. We're recording this on Saturday. Now, as far as I'm aware, no one here on the podcast really had early access, and to be honest, the game was sent out pretty late, so no one's really had a lot more time than anyone else, reviewer, consumer, or otherwise. So we're all kind of mostly in the same boat.
I think Quentin, who was our reviewer, got the game on the full version on like Monday. So they had like a 3-day head start.
And it was kind of fun to see from the distance, like the please update your game. We found something that was like, this game is coming in so hot, and please update before you keep playing because we found some problems before you play.
And even after release, they've already released a hot fix that supposedly fixed 150 bugs, which they're probably all small ticky-tack things, but
yeah, there's still some very noticeable ones here and there that my friends and I have come across, but they're working at it every day. It's a very big complex game. So, and Larian releases always come in a bit hot. It usually takes them a bit to get them all completely fixed up. So it's kind of par for the course.
And compared to Owlcat's games, the Pathfinder games, this is super polished. So I've run into a few cosmetic bugs and a few wiggling issues, but nothing that has hampered my enjoyment at all. So I think we kind of got together as a site like 3 years ago and played the early access version. I believe we have a video up on our YouTube channel. So I've been playing the official release. I know Josh has been playing it in co-op, I believe, with a friend for the official release.
Yeah, it's a full player co-op party, so I've been having a blast.
And then James has been playing it, and Adam has been watching me play it. So vicariously, he's been experiencing it. So I am about 10 to 15 hours in. A lot of what I've done in the game so far has been kind of recovering what I had played in the early access, because early access, even though I only played it in like 2020, 2021, was pretty meaty. It's a big sizable section of the game, which I'm still in the first like region, which I'm at like the 10 or 12 hour mark. James, how much time have you had to put into this game so far?
About 5 hours, not too much, because I've been like playing a bit, but mostly I'm planning to do a co-op campaign with my dad. So
nice.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I think you had mentioned that. So that sounds really neat. So Baldur's Gate 3, of course, a lot of people have come into this game. There have been already a lot of news posts about like Steam concurrent player numbers, how it's over 500,000. I'm not sure exactly where it quite peaked at, but obviously a big hit for Larian. This genre of games, the isometric RPG, the tactical RPG, the CRPG, whatever you want to call it, has always kind of been a little bit more niche compared to like the BioWare, Witcher, Mass Effect sort of realm of Western RPG. But it seems like this one has kind of incorporated a lot of the sensibilities that have allowed those other games to reach a wider audience. And then in addition to the fact where we kind of talked about this last week, how Baldur's Gate 3 is kind of releasing at a time where there's a little bit of a dearth of those experiences. We had Cyberpunk a few years ago. It's kind of a different experience with its first person. You of course have a lot of the kind of the other AA titles, talking about like Elex and some of the things that Piranha Bytes is doing, some of the other publishers over there on the other side of the pond, which of course Larian also is. So this is kind of releasing at a good time for those that have been really those of us that have been really waiting for an RPG of this scope, of this type for several years. Let's hand it off to kind of Josh first, because you're the one that's kind of been playing it kind of as the party focus, as the because this game is treated like a single player game, but of course has the capability to create like a 4-player party and play through the entire experience in co-op in the same way that both the Divinity Original Sin games had. So I'm really curious to hear about your experience, because I'm sitting here kind of playing it as a single player experience. So it's very similar to what I've played with um, Pillars of Eternity or Divinity. So I'm curious what your experience has been like so far.
Yeah, I'm not a big D&D person, but I just been having a fantastic time with this game, and like like two of my friends and I we're not like super big into D&D, and then we have another person, another friend of ours who's like really big into D&D, so he kind of knows like what all the abilities do, and like generally like like if you have a question, he's more than happy to answer it on like just general D&D stuff.
Mhm.
And right now, what my co-op character is he's a dragonborn, that is a bard, and he's also like kind of like the speaker of the group as well. He's really has high charisma, kind of the specializes in range when it comes to combat, and likes to play songs and entertain people. And last night, he got fucked, and it was great. He got dominated by some one of the characters. Like we're doing like an evil playthrough as well. So like one of my friends is like the expected the Dark Urge as well. So we've been doing decisions that like no like sane people wouldn't do on their playthroughs. So our playthrough right now is like mega unhinged and what we've been doing.
That's actually a good way to
Um,
do it, because if you try to play like completely Paragon or whatever, you really have to be careful, a lot of reloading. Where if you just kind of like let chaos ensue, whether or not you're like evil or just like reckless, I feel like that could be a lot of really neat emergent
yeah,
storytelling in terms of just rolling with the
we,
punches.
we've been having a lot of adventures. Like one of the first towns we came across after we escaped the ship from the intro. Like we accidentally started like a civil war in it, and we didn't know how. And like that storyline like looped back around to like a later place that we went through. Um, what like one of my other the one who's super into D&D. Uh, he's kind of like role playing like a mage character, where he's like very desperate to by any means get the parasite, the mind flayer parasite, out of his head, and kind of jumps onto like any like deals into like anyone who tells them, "Hey, I can help you out with that." And like, and it's even got to the point where like his character alone out of our party is like, it something has happened to him physically and in his status that affects him will affect him permanently throughout the game, which is really cool to see because we didn't know exactly how this interaction with a certain character that we came across in our playthrough did, and now he's just like his appearance and what he can do has been permanently altered because of that interaction of trying to take up that character with like them saying, "Oh, I can take out that parasite out of your head." Um, the Dark Urge friend does a lot of fucked up shit. One time at during a long rest at camp, there was a character that came across our camp, and like while everyone was asleep, when he came to it, we saw this event. We checked it on this event that he was like seeing, and just like he just kind of ate that character while we were all sleeping, and then hid the body. And we're like, all right, cool. So we're just pretending that like, oh, that person just left in the morning, and we don't know what happened to them. Just and who could know? Who could know what happened? Really. Um,
I really like how you opened up with like what sort of character you were playing, because of course everyone's gonna have a very different experience based on who they build. And of course, here's where I can give the requisite shout out to those that are less familiar with D&D or tabletop games in general, or even just like this style of RPG in general. There's obviously a lot of different choices in terms of like race and sub-race, class and subclass, or in certain classes like clerics, you have a specific like domain that you specialize in. There is a lot of choices to make. But one thing I do want to give credit to for Baldur's Gate 3 is like when I played both of the Pathfinder games from Owlcat, you are immediately like swarmed with so much information where if you are not like a Pathfinder veteran, like you get overwhelmed, or at least I got really overwhelmed in terms of all the choices, all the subclasses. Where here, I just want to say that Baldur's Gate 3 has done a really good job in terms of making the UI very clear in terms of like, here's why you can cast these spells. You know, wizards, warlocks, clerics all have different ways in which they can cast magic. Some are like class based, some are you just read the spell scrolls if you're a wizard, some are based on your like cleric domain. And just in general, like the tooltips are super helpful for someone like me who I've played like Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. I've played Baldur's Gate 3rd edition, we know 10 years ago, but this is based on 5th edition rules where like the advantage and disadvantage and inspiration work differently. But I don't feel overwhelmed because I think the UI is just very clear in terms of like what things do, how they work, why things are working the way they are.
Yeah, there's so many like smart design decisions. Even like doing like a co-op session, like there's so many like smart things about it. It's like that just makes playing with others like so simple. So, for example, that like when you pull up tab, you can see everyone's inventory at once. You can see what they're wearing and what they have in their bags, and you can always right click an item and immediately like transfer an item to them that they may need. And it's like no hassle when you're continuing a co-op session. All I have to do is load up the save that I did. And then just invite everyone to that session, and they automatically have their character on them already. There's no need to dole it out. They always have their character on them, and it's just and everything's just been just super smooth, and it's been really and it's cool that like anytime like someone gets to a conversation or they gotta drift off somewhere in their cutscene, you can always like just click the icon by them to like when they're in an event to like see what they're seeing, what choices they're making. Like even if like there's like a dialogue option, like it'll show like, hey, this is what I want you to choose, but you know they don't have to choose it, but it'll show like your Steam icon by like what the decision that like you think they should go with. And everything has been working like pretty smoothly. Like there hasn't been like any like connection issues. There hasn't been like any like there's been like a tiny desync issues here and there, but for the scope that this game is managing, like it's been very minor. And like you said with the tooltips, like even it's like just a character creation, when I'm picking like, okay, what perks, what spells do I want? I like that like if you pick like a certain thing that has like a similar effect, let's say like this is like kind of like a spell that enhances defense, and then there you come across like a spell selection, and there's another spell that like has a similar effect. When you hover over that, the tooltip says you already have this on you, but like but this spell is better than that, you know. So it even like straight up like you can affect decrease like redundancies like that you didn't account for because you forgot what you selected. You know, a little like the tooltip will just straight up tell you it's like you already got this, so you're good. Like if you want to go back and like alter that, that's cool. But like you just know that like you already have this, you already selected like a similar thing.
And one thing
just
that's also
moments
kind
ago.
of similar is like when you're doing an ability roll. So one key part of Baldur's Gate 3 is that you will be rolling a ton of virtual dice for ability checks and dialogue and all those things. And if you've got like a party member who can bolster your ability, whether it gives you advantage or it gives you a bonus to your roll, like if you're about to roll for a check, it'll say, hey, like a very early one that pretty much everyone will run into is that the cleric character that you get, Shadowheart, has a cantrip that gives you an extra 1d4 in every ability check. And basically, you don't have to remember to cast that every time you're going to go into a dialogue tree. The game will say like, hey, this will give you an extra chance to succeed here. Do you want to cast it? Which I think is super handy because this game has so many spells, so many cantrips, so many different rituals where and I almost wish there were like hotkeys in terms of or what are they called in Final Fantasy 12? Like the programmatic reminders to
Oh, the what was it? Was it Gambit?
gambits. Yeah. So I remember when I was playing like the Pathfinder games where I wish there were almost like gambits where it's like, hey, this character, like a very early boon that you get is Bless, for instance, gives you a bonus to attack rolls, whatever. In a way, for some of the abilities, the game has that incorporated where it's like, hey, if you cast this, it'll give you the ability to do better on the skill check. Do you want to do that? And even in ways that I wasn't expecting. For instance, my character, I really liked how you opened with like what sort of class you were playing. When I last played Baldur's Gate 2, I played with like a very obscure class. I played like a gnome cleric. And then when I played the Pathfinder game, I played like a Cavalier. So I wanted to play something a little bit more straightforward. So this game I picked, I'm a Dwarven fighter, but I picked the specialty where it's like an Eldritch fighter. So you get some magic. So I'm still trying to get something a little bit that's not quite so like 101. Not that there's anything wrong with that. But so I'm playing a Dwarven like Eldritch fighter. And one of the abilities that you can get is the ability to like increase your size to increase your strength. It's I forget exactly what it's called. I think it's just called enlargement or something like that. But also, like, whenever you're doing strength-based checks, the game reminds me, hey, you can cast this boon on yourself, which I always thought of as like a combat boon, but it can also help you like intimidate people or things like that.
Yeah.
So it's actually kind of fun where it's like, here, this difficulty check for this strength intimidation or whatever, or your strength bonus to this intimidation check can be bolstered if you cast this. Do you want to cast this? And I'm like, sure. It's just a bit silly, but it's really nice that the game just incorporates that, because otherwise I would kind of maybe not forget to do it, but just kind of, it gets lost in the weeds. Like, oh, there's so many abilities, so many things where I forget this thing will improve my strength, and improving my strength improves my intimidation roll. So
Yeah, it's really
the game
great,
really
like
incorporates those.
how interesting like combat and non-combat synergies work, right? So like at one point in my co-op adventure, we went into this palace, like a kind of like this goblin focused palace or stronghold of some sort, and there was this we saw there's this treasure vault in the back, but it was like locked. But our Dark Urge person is sort of like kind of like a budget thief almost. That they're good at lock picking, so they have all the thieves' tools and so forth. So we were trying to like think of like, okay, how do we get it? Like, we really want to see what this treasure vault has, but how are we gonna do this? So our mage had an invisibility spell, so they cast invisibility on the Dark Urge, and then I casted Bardic Inspiration on them, which gives them an enhancement to any ability checks that they come across. So while we're all like looking away, this Dark Urge goes and picks the lock while they're invisible with my Bardic Inspiration on them, and succeeds in lockpicking. Just gets a shit fuck ton of rewards for that treasure vault, and no one saw anything. Like, no one was around, and we didn't see anything. So therefore, everything's all good. And even then, like in combat, that Bardic Inspiration also gives them like buffs as well. And I also have like some debuff spells and some ways to, you know, um, mitigate and help support the team overall while still doing some far range abilities and damage. And then, of course, after every turn, I just make sure to tune into. I bust out my lute and play a random song, and there's quite a bit of like divinity references in the songs that you can play as well. So it's really cool to see like how you can like unexpectedly like help each other, like to get like past like just really dumb things that you see in the environment. You're like, okay, what's a good way to go about this? Like when we're infiltrating like another place, we're like, oh man, this jump is like really far. I was like, oh, one of the starting abilities that I got that is kind of picked out of whim was Featherfall, and that casts an AOE effect on the whole party that like for like for a few turns they don't take any falling damage. So we can all jump down together and access places that you normally wouldn't, like unless you without taking damage normally. But because of Featherfall, we now have like interesting traversal options and access routes that maybe would have been more difficult than like for other parties.
One thing that I actually thought was kind of neat in a very similar area was just things that I didn't quite understand why it was working that way at first, but it just makes sense. If you cast Invisible, but pick up an item that's like on a shelf, people will still realize that the item is missing. And the same is true if you
Mhm.
pickpocket. Pickpocketing in this game is actually sort of really difficult relative to other games that I've played anyways. In a lot of other games, you go to pickpocket, you go into like stealth mode or whatever, you go to a character, you try to pickpocket, you have a dice roll, and then if you pass, you get the item and you're done. However, in Baldur's Gate 3, and I actually had to Google this because I wasn't sure it was the intended behavior, even though it makes sense. If you pickpocket an item, you have to do the normal ability roll to successfully steal the item. But then, unless you leave the area like carefully and stealthily, they'll still notice that something is like amiss because the item's now missing, right? So you usually have to pass a persuasion check as well, because you'll be questioned and be like, hey, this item's now missing. Do you know anything about it? So there's like this double layer to being able to pilfer things, which makes it kind of tedious. So I'm kind of like, man, that's annoying. But also, if it wasn't that way, it'd be really easy to break the game open, because you could go to any merchant and just like steal their whole inventory and then leave or whatever. So I'm kind of two minds about it. I'm sure there's like a good combination of like spells and passives or whatever that you can still manage it. But every time you steal an item, you also got to be ready to like declare innocence when they start snooping. But, and also, if you're invisible, you can steal items out of chests or boxes or whatever, and people won't question because it's not like missing from a tabletop. I'm not sure that's intended, but I would think it is. So like in that treasure trove that you're talking about, I remember being invisible and stealing from it, and no one ever questioned me. It could also be because it's like part of the way, because proximity matters. There's usually so many systems under the hood where I'm not quite sure whether it's I got lucky or the positioning goes just no one was looking my way when I stole the item.
Line of sight definitely does matter in this game. Like, like
yeah.
if you hold shift, like you can like see like kind of like their cone of vision, and like even for like non-combat stuff, that'll come into effect. Like for example, we went to this bandits camp, and I was able to persuade them that we were non-hostile when we were going in, so they disabled all the traps in it. So we were, it was kind of nice cruising in there. But then when I went to go meet up with the leader of that bandit camp, we did something that they didn't like, and we didn't. There's no idea that we didn't know that they didn't like this. So we kind of got into a fight with them, but that was fine. So like we beat them, but then later, further into like that cavern where they had this bandits camp at, there were like other non-hostile people. They were kind of like, I don't know, they're like kind of servants of them or so forth. But then there's like other things like at the back that like, oh, we just kind of assume they're like non-hostile. So like our dark urge starts like lock picking out in the open to like kind of get into like the back rooms to like try to loot them. And then immediately they're like, what the fuck are you doing? And like immediately we got into battle, and we're like kind of all split up and kind of in a bad position. Like there were some explosives nearby that like they shot into and like immediately downed the dark urge. I was barely like, it almost hit me, but it didn't. But I was on a wooden bridge, and like I couldn't get to the dark urge attack to like kind of help him back up because there were like two wolves surrounding me. So I was engaged with them. So in a very funny manner that like it just kind of slipped all of our minds, was like the mage tried to help me out to like kind of get the wolves off of me so I could go and help the dark urge. And like he's like a ranged spellcaster, and he chose the shatter spell. And what we all, well, I didn't know, the rest didn't know except him. He forgot. Like when he casted shatter, it broke the wooden bridge that I was on beneath me. So it killed the two wolves, but it also downed me at like this less elevated platform that was easier, I mean, not more difficult to reach as well. So like it was a pretty losing battle. We didn't wipe. Like it didn't help that like our one of our ogre front linesmen, like he's like or she's like and like has like a spear or halberd, like their character as a female ogre, and like they kept doing their like min damage rolls. So like even though the like they're very strong, sometimes the die just kind of doesn't work in your favor, and then all of a sudden out of nowhere they hit like for 34 non crit, and so forth. So it's just one of those things. Like we were able to overcome this fight. It was a long and kind of arduous fight where like half of us were pretty much down for like most of it. Luckily, we were able to the ones who were down, which is the Dark Urge and I, we were able to succeed in our death rolls for a good while, and we were able to get back up and get back to the fight while it was like mostly over. But it's just one of those things that like a very small thing that you don't think about in the when you're out of combat, and like you just assume like, oh yeah, like even like the rest of the people here are not hostile, so like obviously they won't like come attack us because like it seems like they're cool with us. It's like no, like they're still gonna get mad if like you try to break into their fucking other places and like you're just in their sight. Like they're not gonna take it like lying down. So it can lead to like something really disastrous like that, almost like party wiped. But we were able to overcome it, and it was really funny when when the wooden bridge shattered beneath him. Like, what the fuck happened? He's like, oh.
I had a similar thing with the spider fight in like the cave area where the spiders will crawl in their webs, but you can destroy the webs under them to knock them down and get them prone. And I had like a character on a web where I'm like, well, if my character dies, I can just or like goes down, I can pick them back up. So I'll just have like this one character like be an expendable target, sit on the web, try to taunt the spider over, then just knock them both down, and then take out the spider and pick up my dude. Like, thanks for taking one for the team. And one thing I think I should say, because we haven't made it clear, is that when you mentioned the Dark Urge, one thing that Baldur's Gate 3 has that is clearly a borrowed mechanic from Divinity Original Sin 2, which is where I believe it was introduced, is the origin character. So this game has like obviously a series of companions. They've been, pretty well regarded in the marketing, like Shadowheart, Asterion, Gale, Wynn, all those. So you can pick one of those characters as your origin character. So you take the role of that character, and one of those is the Dark Urge. Or you can create a custom character, which is what I did. And then those characters will just simply be party members. But I believe the Dark Urge, if you don't play as him or them as your origin character, they'll still appear in the game as an NPC in some fashion. I haven't encountered them yet. So that one's kind of a unique case where they're only playable if you select them as the origin character. Obviously not from the original Baldur's Gate, that is from original Sin 2, but it's kind of fun if you want to play as like a predetermined character, but still obviously have control over their specific attributes and things like that.
Yeah. I think about one of my crowning achievements in my playthrough so far is we were at this goblin village and my character just kind of was wandering around and wandered into like a really potentially bad, dangerous situation where there's three big ogres kind of munching down and like they're looking at me and they're like, oh, we're gonna eat you next. So I had to like really talk my way out of that one. Like I had like a 20 die roll check there, and like I was able to pass it like on my first roll, I believe. And like due to like what I selected during that conversation, which could have been bad because like these three ogres like all had the potential to just kill us on their own. Instead, out of that conversation that I had with them, I was able to convince them I'm not hostile. We're on your side, and they gave me like this special one-time use item where I can blow on this horde, and they will fight for us in a battle. That one time, I didn't use it yet.
I got that item too, and I'm still holding on to it. I'm like,
Yeah,
I'll hold on to it when I need it. I'll probably be at like the final boss, and I'll be like, oh, I still got this horde. I guess I'll try it.
Yeah, that was really cool. It's like I just wondering, like, what the fuck is that? It's like, what the fuck did you do? It's like, oh well, I'm in here now, and that's where I proved my talking chops in the game. We're like, all right, I'm the speaker of this group. I got it under control, and so far it's been working out. Most of the times I've been able to speak. It has been working in our favor.
James, what have you like? What race and class did you pick?
Tiefling Barbarian.
How's that going?
That's going pretty well. It's going pretty well.
I really do like how tieflings, like the very first like encampment that you're likely to meet is basically an encampment of tieflings, which they also have a pretty major role in Pathfinder, Wrath of the Righteous, which is of course like Pathfinder originally got spun off of D&D, I believe, 3rd edition. So it's really cool to see because like I don't think I've played a lot of other games where they're quite as prominent early on, but there is like you encounter a lot of them early on. There's actually a pretty early quest, like when the ship crash lands. This is all like within the first couple hours of the game, and you're like regathering your party. I guess we should probably go into the story premise. We really haven't done that. We'll go into that after this. When the ship crash lands and you're trying to like regather your party, the Githyanki character is like being interrogated by some tieflings, but the dwarf that I picked was I'm probably going to butcher this name, like Duger. It's like the dark cave dwarf. That's and as that character, first of all, it's kind of been interesting how often and frequently people reference my race in the game. So it's like it seems like it really does quite matter. And you might say like mechanically does it matter? I'm not sure because I haven't played as the other class to like compare and contrast like whether or not it actually plays the actual mechanical role. But just in terms of the narrative, lots of people have been calling me out like, oh, you've come from the caves or whatever. I don't see a lot of your kind up here, etc. And those two tieflings were initially hostile until, and this is kind of dumb, uh since I had the game on early access, I got like the digital deluxe edition upgrade, which doesn't give you a lot of things. It gives you just some like silly underwear garments or whatever. But one of the things it does give you is an amulet that allows you to shapeshift and cast that once per long rest. So I used that to disguise myself as a thief, as a tiefling, and then they were no longer hostile to me. So it's just kind of fun to see like the like these abilities. They're a lot of them are very specifically about combat mechanics, like how many times can you cast it in a battle, how many times can you use it per short rest or long rest. But there are some like invisibility, like leaping abilities, like being able to there's an ability where you can basically port to any place you can see. So even if you can't leap to it, if you can see it, you can port to it, like for your wizard. There's a lot of abilities that are just about exploration, or even just like through dialogue, like charming people, things like that. uh and even the charm person ability has like uses both in and out of battle. And I had a scroll of charm person on me, which is used to give you advantage on charisma based checks. Like for instance, I believe performance is one of those. And I had forgot that I had it, and I was doing a performance check. And similar to the thing I mentioned before, at the bottom of the dice roll, it's like, hey, you have this scroll. Do you want to use it to help your chance on this check? So I just think that's really smart, because otherwise in these games, like typically I end up with like so many scrolls that I forget to even look at. Like that, like, oh, this scroll could actually be useful in this situation. I should try using it. Or the game is like, hey, you're doing a check where this scroll applies. Do you want to use it? And I know I'm kind of beating that horse or beating that drum kind of a lot, but it's just other games of this style haven't done that, and it's really kind of, I'm really appreciating that it does it here. The kind of the smart inventory application when you're doing tasks in the game, either
Yeah,
in or out of
it
combat.
really shows like how much like work this game has been put, like how much work Larry has put into this game ever since like its early access release. I mean, even before early access release. Like just the amount of polish and care that has been put into this game is astounding. It's been amazing. Like it feels there's like a large variety of freedom that like it just that just feels like you're like it's at your disposal. Like you never know exactly like how things are gonna turn out, and the way that how the way things turn out never really quite what was in your mind. And like and kind of considering like the possibilities of how you could like tackle things is kind of like almost borderline overwhelming. But I think you just have to think of it in the framework of like, this is my playthrough, I'm gonna play through it the way I want to. There's like no right or wrong way to go about things just kind of like happen because of like both factors I can and can't control. Uh, like for example, like that tiefling village that like you were talking about. Like it's like I'm thinking about. It's like yeah, that's the village that kind of like we started a civil war in, and very early on, all the tieflings were like slaughtered in my playthrough, in there, and like Durga, we kind of murdered the shit out of Durga, early on. Not because like it was like one of our like obvious option in front of us. It's like kind of just things just happen and we didn't know why things happen, but like hey, they're hostile to us, and we're gonna take them down. And like and that story like kind of loops back around on like the things that as a result of what happened there. At a
Probably worth
later point.
mentioning, this is obvious, but I'm going to mention it anyways. It's not like these are like random. It's more there's like rules to everything in the
Yeah.
game, but there's so many different permutations and combinations of how things can turn out that it almost feels random. But
Yeah.
but there's rules behind like how everything happens.
Yeah, and that it just feels like very very refreshing in that regard. Like, and it's really cool to see that like they presented it in a way that like feels consumable for people who are also not like into like big D&D tabletop. Like you don't need to be like super familiar with like that sort of like rule set, that whole realm. Like still have fun with the game, as well, and I really appreciate that. And I also heard that like from people who played early access and going to this game, just like the amount of like just like the overall experience is like just so much better. Like they were saying, like the UI is like a million times better since early access. Immediately when you went to the full game, it's like yeah, you just can feel like the level of additional polish that has been put into this game. and it's just super impressive. I really am having like a really enjoyable time, and I always look forward now to like it's like I can't wait for our next session, uh, and seeing what kind of shit we go. Like we really play like maybe like 4 to 5 hours, like every time we play together. But like so much fucking happens in that's just like unbelievable. We have an infamous screenshot now that we took last night when my character was getting boned by this drow commander that we met. And yeah, the sex scenes of this game are uh they're a lot more graphic than you think. I'll give it at that.
Well, I remember just even on the character creator, you can just inspect your character nude and change their genitals and how they look. Which
Yeah,
to
you
me,
can have
to me,
penis A, penis B, penis C, or vulva A, vulva D.
and
Yeah, multiple options.
and to me, it's just like, oh, okay, that's fine. Like a lot of people, I think, are making a bigger deal out of it than it is. Like, oh my god, this game has nudity. I'm like, yeah, it does. I'm
I
pretty
mean,
sure
people
Divinity
said the
did
same
too.
thing about Cyberpunk, as
Yeah.
well. So
I think I've seen that video clip with the squirrel. I'm not sure you know what I'm talking
Oh,
about.
if
It's
you
pretty
get
the
graphic.
one where you kick it.
Yeah. It's
There-
pretty
there
over
are-
the top. I wasn't expecting that.
there are two abilities in the game that are very much Larian abilities. Speak with animals and speak with the dead. Speak with the dead might be D&D, but speak with animals, like I remember that was a big kind of selling point of Divinity games as well, and especially around the Druid village, which is a key point of one of the early story things. There's a lot of animals to speak to, so I think you can very easily give it to one of the companions, Will, the ability to speak with animals, and there's things that people who decide not to invest in that ability or try it out are going to miss. But then there's also like this game is so densely packed in terms of not just like the characters and the stories and the environments and the quests, but like the fact that every single area, if you speak to an NPC that doesn't seem like they have anything meaningful going on, they'll still have like a unique line of dialogue to give you, even if it doesn't like lead to anything. And like I put on the speak with animals ability and I spoke to some squirrels. Like there were some squirrels that were listening to a character try to play a lute very poorly, and they're like, "Oh God, make it stop" or whatever. So like a a lampooning of like Sleeping Beauty or whatever. Uh, and then there was like a bear that was sleeping at the bottom of a lift that needed to get a move. And I'm just like, can you please move? And he's like, oh sure, that was inconsiderate of me. And he just moved. And like invest in the speak to animals ability. It's pretty fun. And there's a lot of extra dialogue, and I haven't used it as much, but the speak with corpses ability,
I've
like
used it. I used that.
it's interesting because like you think like there's no way this corpse has some unique dialogue because it's just like a random corpse, right? But no, it does. So there's that. When I forget, like Larry, and I remember they did this more with Divinity Original Sin 2 than they did with Baldur's Gate. One of the things they used to market was like how many lines of dialogue they had. Like we have 15,000 unique lines of dialogue. That's 5,000 more than the last game. I don't remember what it is, but that's one of the things where I can see like eventually those numbers just kind of get like too big to like really physically mean anything. But when you play through the game, you can kind of see exactly why. Like, oh wow, there's lots of little things where you get dialogue if you use different abilities or if you try to sneak and do things certain ways that certain people aren't just going to even run into based on the way you play the game.
Yeah. I also had a rap battle with like a public speaker who was getting like and like the goblins were not getting happy with like of that jester like losing that rap battle, and they caged him up. So like, well, that's how it goes. You just suck. So I don't know. Like this game is like it's very goofy, it's very self-aware, but it does it in a very like in a very playful way. Like I really appreciate like the tone of humor they're going for in this game. It's like very almost like nerdy dorky humor, which I appreciate.
Oh, the humor in this game I do think is a lot better than like the humor in Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 is really a product of its time. And not only that, but because um there's not nearly like as much voice acting at all. It's got to be conveyed through text and through like caps, and it's very, very silly. It's very, very like Monty Python esque. Here, well, I think one of the funniest moments of Baldur's Gate 3 so far. First of all, the humor is subtle. I would say Baldur's Gate 3 is a lot less whimsical than like Divinity Sin 1 and 2, especially 1. Divinity Original Sin 1 is very whimsical, almost to its detriment. where 2 was a lot more straight-laced, but kept a little bit of that flavor, and Baldur's Gate 3, I feel that as well. You end up one of the characters that's with you is Astarion. He is a rogue, and eventually, very early in his story, you learn that he is a vampire. Though he's more like what I would consider like a thrall or a ghoul. He was like bit by a vampire, but he's not actually like a vampire himself, but he calls himself a vampire. And he's being hunted. And you find like one of these hunters, like in the south side of the first region, that's looking for Astarion. And even if you have Astarion in your party, he doesn't realize that that's him. So of course you can kind of there's options to be, you know, discreet about it and not give him away. There's options just to be an ass and say here he is. But there's also like pretty humorous options where it's like, oh, so you're looking for a guy named Astarion. Astarion, what do you think about that? When he's in your party or whatever. So it's pretty subtle, and it's fun without being like obnoxious. Or the tone of the game otherwise is pretty, I won't say like super grim dark, but it plays it straight laced, at least in the initial area. But it carves out these little moments that give it a little bit of levity. There's also some like pretty kind of like sad or somber moments. Like you find like a dog that is near like the corpse of its owner, and if you speak to him, you don't have to speak to him, but either way you can tell obviously he's very sad and distraught. But then you can kind of adopt him, and then he comes to your camp. You can do the same thing with like an owl bear cub, and it's very silly because you can end up being responsible for its mother's death. Then you end up recruiting it. So there's some moments that are like really pull on your heartstrings as well. And then there's of course like early on in the game, there's a lot of mystery about. I guess here we are. Like, how far are we into this podcast? 40 minutes. We really haven't talked about this story narrative, which I don't think we need to spend a lot of time on because it's not what I end up thinking about most of the time in this game. Most of the time, I think about how the gears are working, how and exploring the different areas. But for those that haven't followed the game since early access, the very high level story premise is that your character and a selection of many characters are abducted and are aboard a Mind Flayer Nautilus, and each character has been kind of infected with a sort of parasite, like a leech, that ends up going into their brain and giving them like these ithelid, like psionic powers. Now, normally, under most circumstances, the conventional wisdom of the world is that these characters will eventually turn into mind flayers themselves within like a few days. However, your characters are not. They just have these ithelid powers, and they've had them for weeks, and they're not turning. And the big question is like, why aren't you turning? Was this intended? Was it not? What's the reason for this? And then very early on, and this is something that's kind of given away a little bit when you're at character creation. When you're at character creation, you are asked after you create your character to very quickly create. I forget exactly what they call them, but
Guardian.
the guardian. That's it. Basically, choose like the gender and race of a guardian character that basically speaks to you in your dreams. And this character, after a few long rests, you end up dreaming about them. And they basically say, like, you know, the world of Faerun is at risk. We need you to harness the powers of the Ithelid. I can help keep you safe. And it's like, do we trust this person? Do we not trust this person? And I'm not far enough in the game to really, I can't possibly spoil it because I don't know like what the outcomes are. But you can like you can go all in early on and say, yeah, I'm not scared of the consequences. I'm going to totally abuse this as much as I can. Every single time you have the ability to use this power, it actually has like a specific call out. Like whenever you're using your different dialogue options, there's call outs for like strength, charisma, intimidation, whatever. There's a call out called Ithelid, which is basically like, you know, taking advantage of that power that you have. And I feel like I wonder if you get different endings based on how many times you use it, but I don't know for certain. This other NPC is saying, "Don't worry about it. You should have to use it. You have to in order to save the world." But I won't tell you specifically why. So there's a lot of intrigue and a lot of questions that within the first 10 or 15 hours you really haven't answered. Within the first 10 hours or so, it's all about basically there's three major factions in the area. There's the goblins, there's the refugees, which are mostly tieflings, and then there's the druids. And how you there's a lot of proposed options for the way you deal with those. And I I think if you go into like the early access forums, of course, a lot of the permutations have been sussed out at this point, but how they play out for like long-term ramifications are still kind of being doled out. Of course, like I said, we've all played this for only 5 to 10 to maybe 15 hours at the most. We don't have any like additional information that because we didn't really get the code very early. And this is the sort of game it'll probably take the combined effort of all the players, all 500,000 of them that are playing at the same time or whatever, to suss out exactly how things work. And there have been a few. We talked about a level of polish in terms of all the sorts of things that Larian has considered in terms of the way the game mechanics work. To the game's like, I don't want to say detriment, but because it is so many like interlocking systems like that, there are ways that the game can kind of break or work in unintended ways. For instance, one thing that I did early on that I couldn't quite tell if it was intended or not, but early on in the Tiefling village, there's like a little gang of young Tiefling children that you either can get on your side or you can kind of treat them like brats and kind of treat them like like they're no good, just like thieves and burglars. And I kind of got on their bad side, and the leader of this little kid gang was basically like, "You'll come to regret this." And then the authorities of the town came to me and basically said, "Hey, this character basically reported you. What do you have to say for yourself?" And you had to pass like a persuasion or intimidation check to basically alleviate any suspicion on you. However, I for whatever reason, I had to do that for each of my 4 characters, which I
Oh,
didn't know if that was intended. Like, here's my main character. Here comes the cop. Hey, you've been accused of this. What do you say for yourself? And then I had Astarion in my party. He was approached. Hey, you've been accused of this. What do you have to say for yourself? And then I had Gale in my party. You've been accused of this. What do you have to say for yourself? And of course, certain characters are much better at being persuasive than others. So I kind of had to like find a way to like navigate through this with characters with very different skill sets to figure to because I wanted to stay in their good graces. Of course, I could have just rolled the punches and been like, whatever, we're hostile now, or whatever, I'm in jail now. But I didn't want to do that. So I had to figure out my way through that. And that was a little bit tedious, but that was a little bit self-imposed because I didn't know if it was intended. And there's certain ways where things don't work as intended. And I assume that's the reason why they, just like Adam mentioned, they've already fixed like 150 bugs because there's so many ways to approach basically anything in this game, where they can't possibly have configured all the different permutations in which you can do these things, because the game is offering all the tools to the player. So those are the things I assume will be polished up and sussed out probably very frequently over the first month. So I guess us
yeah.
PC players are gonna kind of be the beta testers for that. But that said, it's nothing that's really hampered my enjoyment at all.
Yeah, the only real things that are kind of minor, obviously minor, like in the grand spectacle of things that my friends and I have come across is like one, sometimes like the like hitboxes on like when selecting enemies can be kind of janky if you're trying to do like more fine, precise like movements and actions, and like the way that like enemies are positioned on the battlefield. Sometimes like the hitbox doesn't line up. Like say you're trying to hit something, it's like you're clearly hovering over it, but it's saying that like you don't have line of sight on it or something like that. So some issues with that are still there. Like very minute is like say what are the name of the abilities that you can just like freely cast and like with no repercussions. Um, it's like True Strike and like the illusion one and like the illumination one, like that category of abilities. Some of them like the mage's hand, like it says you could it's one of those abilities that you can freely cast, but it's like for whatever reason right now you can only cast it once per like uh and then you have to wait for a short rest to like refill it for whatever reason, even though it's like one of those abilities that you should be able to freely cast, which is like
That is
kind of
that is a bit strange.
yeah. So it's just like in the overall scope of things, like there are these like it's like 95% of it. It's still probably working. As well as from what I can see right now is like working as intended, which is very pretty impressive. Especially because of like just the scope of the game once again. And then I'm sure in the coming months, like they'll squash out, tune up any sort of like hiccups like. So I'm willing to forgive it because it's so complex, and you can tell how complex it is just by pouring some hours into it. Just like, yeah, there's a lot of gears spinning in behind the scenes on this one.
This might be an unpopular opinion, but having played, no, I haven't played one of these types of games in the last several years, since like doing the original Sin, or sorry, Deadfire in like 2018 or so. One thing I always feel like whenever I play these games is that there's just too many spells.
Mm.
There's so many spells, like for the cantrips, which are the spells you can cast repeatedly. You
Oh
don't get
yeah,
the
yeah.
long rest between them. there's like one for every element. Then there's like a few like more boon supporty ones, and there's probably like 10 or 11 or 12 different cantrips, and then a lot of them are have kind of buffed counterparts for level 1 and level 2. And like, even though my wizard is like level 4, and I believe the max level in this game right now is level 12, which I believe for a typical long-term tabletop session, that's very typical, is to have a level 12 cap. Basically, what that means is that every level up is very significant. It's very impactful. If you're level 4 and your enemy's level 5, you can feel it, which I always think is good. But there's like whenever I look at like my hotbar at the bottom of the screen for like any of my spellcasters, there's just so many options, and I almost wish there were fewer choices. Maybe my brain is just not big enough.
This is why you can make a custom one.
Yeah, but because usually I just find like, all right, if I want to deal damage, these are the two I like. If I want to be able to port to a place that I see, I like this spell, and this spell helps for ability checks. And you kind of find like your favorite 4 or 5, and then you've got all these other little niche application ones. Like this spell helps you with dexterity saving throws, and like I'm sure that's good for certain situations, but it's too niche for me to like
That's why you want to. That's why there's literally a custom hotbar that you can build for yourself. Down
I
at the
really
bottom.
do like how the hotbar works in terms of like I don't know what you call them, but like the sliders. Like on the
Yeah.
left side, you have like all your martial actions, like your main actions. Then in the middle, you have like your bonus actions. These are things like dashing or doing an extra attack with your offhand or whatever. And then on like the right side, you have like your like item based ones or spell based abilities. And based on the character, you can kind of like you can adjust how much real estate is on each part of the bar, and you can make the bar like 2, 3, 4 rows tall. Which none of that stuff is super unique to this game. Other games have had very similar things for customizing the hotbar, but just the way it's implemented, it's very fluid. Like you can literally just like click and drag and create more space for items or more space for spells depending on the character, and it's just really neat and really intuitive. So I kind of wanted to give a shout out to that.
But then, like in terms of like it's one of those weird things that kind of criticizing the game for having too many spells. It's like, well, that's just D&D, that's the spell selection.
Yeah,
D&D.
it is just D&D, and what I
Yeah.
need to do is I just need to sit down and like, instead of just saying like, I like magic missile, I just keep casting that. Or as a level 2 spellcaster, I really like the scorching ray spell. Just like, all right, I'm gonna actually try out some of these other spells and make sure that like I do something that synergizes with my armor. Like if I have abilities that do extra damage whenever I do poison damage, actually look at what these spells do, which ones are long range, which are in short range, which ones are recharged on short rest or long
And
rest.
it's also one of those things like you don't need to learn everything right away too. It's kind of like a gradual process too, right? Like on a say another playthrough down the road, like you can like try to do something different, like with knowledge that you gained on like previous playthroughs as well. It's not like you don't have to push
Right.
yourself to like learn everything in one go.
Mm-hmm. But there are a lot of spells. So if you like
Yes.
spells, there are a lot of spells. And I think I said this earlier, but the game does do a really good job uh, when you go to the spell screen, showing like these are your cantrips, these are your class abilities, these are the spells you learned that you have slotted and you have prepared. So I really did like how the UI helps someone like me who has a hard time wrapping their mind around all the different spell options. The tooltips are very easy to follow, and I've found good ways to keep, like, normally I wouldn't have my fighter specialize into the whatever it's called, like the Eldritch Knight, to cast magic, because I'm like, oh, I'm too simple brain for that. I either want to be all martial or all melee. I'm like, you know what? I'll try something more hybrid. Uh, so the game does a good job kind of easing you into it, and for those that want to dig in and learn it, it is approachable. It's not some incomprehensible thing.
And you can just see like the future is pretty bright for this game. Like it already had like a very very great start as we were talking about earlier, but like an ongoing theme that we've been talking about on this podcast for many weeks now is like when you think about like games with legs. So will this game have legs? Will it have continued like support? Will like is there like any meaningful thing to do after you play the game? And with this game, you can tell right away. Like if you're the type of person that like wants to see like different permutations in different playthroughs, like this is that game because you can see just like you can have like one playthrough can be drastically differently from like the next one, depending on like what sorts of character you make, what sorts of party compositions you make, whether you play it with yourself or with other people, and the sorts of like things you decide to do, and seeing like different outcomes to a side quest, and seeing what like how different decisions can have multiple ripple effects down the line for like other parts of the game. Like this is a game that like you can just tell right away that like you will spend many hours on if you really want to see like not everything because that'll be way too long, but at least a good chunk of things that the game has to offer. Like this is a game you can tell right away will have legs.
So there's one thing we haven't quite answered yet, and this might be a bit obvious, but we haven't really talked about, is the game good?
I
How are we
like it a
feeling about
lot.
it so
I'm
far?
having fun. I think game's very good. If you guys get it,
Game of the year.
I don't know. I mean, it's one of my favorite games I played this year so far. I don't know if it's like going to be on my game of the year. You'll see down the line when I put more hours into it and like get further onto my playthrough. But for me, it's a very strong, good first impression so far.
I'm mostly, and I've already talked about this, but I don't mind hammering it home, just how dense the game is. Like you can spend like you enter a room that has just like a lot of bookshelves and maybe a couple NPCs, and you could spend 40 minutes in there just digging around, finding all the like secrets, figuring out like, oh, how does this relate to what I've learned previously, reading the books. Um, it's a pace of game that I feel like so many other RPGs now are, or either RPGs or games that just slap on like a progression tree or whatever, and they're just like, yeah, we have RPG elements, or this is an action RPG. And this game is like truly like, no, you really like kind of immerse yourself, and you really learn a huge cast of characters, and they all have unique voice acting. One of the things I credited my way back when the Divinity Original Sin 2 game for, I believe, is that compared to Divinity Original Sin 1, Divinity Original Sin 2, basically everything was voice acted, even like the smallest NPC. Even if an NPC just has like very rote standard dialogue, you speak to them and they'll say their one line of dialogue, and it's voice acted. And in this game, not only is it voice acted, but it changes to that more like traditional third person perspective and not the isometric perspective, which is just kind of a style thing. Some people might not mind that. Some people might think it's more immersive, but it really is quite neat where you see a character that's not related to any quest and you talk to them and they might have 3 or 4 or 5 different lines of dialogue for you to learn more about them or the area. This game is just so dense, and you can spend, like Josh said, on a single playthrough a ton of time, and then on a second playthrough you can spend a ton of time again and see something completely different, which I think is to the game's credit. Does that make the game good? That might be up to someone's interpretation or their own preference, but it's a time sink in a good way, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to like seeing what my solo playthrough will look like because I made a solo character, but I haven't really put that much time into it because co-op has been pretty regularly right now. But I made a drow like cleric. And I only like got off the tutorial section. I don't know what I'm gonna do with them yet, but I think like like the there's just pros and cons to like doing a solo playthrough and a co-op playthrough. Like co-op depending on how many people you have, I'm doing a full four player full co-op playthrough, and like but the thing that you miss in co-op is like the party banter between your characters because you're all playing your own custom character in there if you're all making custom characters, and just like the banter is like the conversation you strike up with your friends whether you're role playing or not. Meanwhile, like the solo or maybe duo playthrough, you'll get to see more like the banter between like characters like you recruit in your playthrough and seeing how that party building and that relationship comes into fruition in that sense. And that's something that people should try out, but both flavors of the game and both styles of gameplay, because like I really appreciate that like there's not a lot of like big budget super polished like RPGs, especially CRPGs that you can fully co-op like regularly. Even like just co-op RPGs that you can co-op, really even up to 4 people. You know, and just seeing like a release of this caliber come out and really nail it, and it just feels so good to like interact with your other party members in a meaningful way. They're not just there to fill up screen real estate and like for manpower. Like you're all contributing something to your goal in your own way, and that feels super meaningful. And you all have stories and things to talk about with each other, like recounting like, oh, remember that shit that we did yesterday, like
Yeah,
dude, that was hilarious. And like we're still laughing, like about our entire playthrough because it's just been a blast.
I think this game, if you've got like the friend group or just the one other friend or two friends or whoever, that you can really set aside like the time to have like a regular session and have like the discipline to go through and play the game completely in co-op, it would be a really quite, a really fun experience. So we'll almost certainly also talk more about Baldur's Gate 3 next week once we are farther, and potentially we can get our reviewer on the podcast as well, who's had by a nose a little bit more time with the game, with a little bit of a head start. But we'll talk a little bit more about how the game progresses past the first act. Does it hold up? Of course, if Larian puts any more significant fixes into the game, if anything super significant, we can talk about those, and go into that next week with going a little bit deeper into how the different storylines progress, how if the game holds up or does it kind of crater into the second and third acts, and just see kind of if our perspective changes on it as we go forward. So the next thing that I have listed here is not explicitly for a game, or maybe it is. It's for the Granblue Fantasy Summer streaming event. And I'll be honest, I will have to hand this off to either Josh or Chow, because I know that this event has been referenced. People were expecting more news about either Granblue Fantasy Relink or Granblue.
Granblue Fantasy.
Yeah, that's it.
Oh, okay. I thought.
Yeah, you're thinking of the fighting game, probably Granblue Fantasy versus Rising.
I just thought it had a subtitle. I guess not. I apologize. You see, this is why I'm handing it off. So was this summer event specifically for the mobile game or for the fighting game or for Relink or kind of the whole IP?
It is just the mobile game. It's nothing but the mobile game.
All right. So
imagine I told Josh to stay up like till 7 a.m. to watch all that news.
Nope. I was like, I'd rather get my sleep. Because that, like, the side games is holding your Granblue Fantasy Summer stream, and like, just the once again, anytime side games has a stream or event these days, people are gonna be like, oh man, do I stay up to get more news on the fighting game or the RPG? I'm like, I'm so past that. I'm like, I'm not staying up 6 hours for like 20 minutes of news of some that may or may not be there. And sure enough, I made the right decision. I was like, I'm just getting my sleep.
Yeah, they chose to have all the fighting game news at Evo because apparently Evo is ongoing right now. Is it?
Yeah, I have it on my other monitor, just watching the finals. But yeah, what they showed at Evo, they had a special industry panel there for like the fighting game developers to show off what they want to share at the first day on like the main stage and the mainstream. So side games there. They showed off, Granblue Fantasy versus Rising, which is the follow-up to Versus, and then so they showed the character trailer for Nier there. Then they showed off they announced that Nier is going to be also a playable character versus Rising. They were going over the more of the modes in the Fall Guys mode they're adding to the game in online multiplayer lobbies. And just general other stuff just minor stuff that'll carry over from the original game into the sequel, which is story progress, any online trophies you may have had, any special skins that you may have won in the first game and so forth. And then they also announced that they're gonna have alternative costumes for characters coming in versus Rising as well. But
people are complaining. It's oh, why can't Guilty Gear get old costumes for characters?
Yeah, but people are gonna be like that, and I get it to some extent. But and they also had to re-clarify because I don't know why it took them this long to finally get a clear message out to people. But they had to clarify once again that Versus Rising is not an update to it's not like a patch update or a firmware update to Granblue Fantasy Versus. It's a whole new separate product that you will have to rebuy once they start selling it, because it's they had to basically rebuild the game from the ground up to incorporate the rollback netcode for online multiplayer. Because that's there's an ongoing thing with fighting games, to have rollback. You'll hear it from developers time and time again. It's you need to build the game from the ground up with that in mind from the get-go if you're going to incorporate rollback into the game. It's not something that you can just easily patch in gracefully. There are a few fighting games that have done it, but it's very few and far between. And most of them, if they want a smooth rollback experience, they need to really build the game from the ground up. And that's what side games basically sound on stage. It's we basically we all the development costs that we put into the first game, we basically had to do that again plus more for this game. It's like
I'm not sure that pays off because I don't know. I just feel like a lot of the people that were interested in the fighting game, they just bought it originally to get the mobile good bonus. Those are for like the hardcore Granblue players, and the people that don't really know anything about Granblue, they just come in here, and I think the original netcode soured their impression of the game, and then as time
well,
went on,
that's the thing with side games. Like they can always do that fucking trick again of like getting Granblue codes into Versus Rising and get easy sales. I don't like that practice. Personally, I think it's really really cheap.
yeah, they
For
do it all the
for
time. Like even for the animes and everything. Like if you read like anime sites, they'll be like, the number one selling anime is Granblue for some reason. I don't know why, but can someone clarify this? And the staff actually doesn't know that. And the reason why is like you get these awesome end game items in the mobile game if you buy the DVDs.
Yeah, it's
I don't
like
know.
I do not like that practice, but but that's what makes them easy money because people who are so invested in the mobile game will easily cough up the money. Just get like they basically buy the game, get the code, and then like resell the game or let the game rot.
Yeah,
And
I'm actually care more about that bonus than the fucking game itself at
exactly,
this point.
and it's
Yeah.
so like what does that say about the game itself? That kind of stuff.
Does it have any integrity? Probably not.
No,
Maybe.
so no. But that's personal feelings aside on that practice. That's what they shared at Evo for the most part. They haven't announced a release date yet. They might say something at the finals, which is later on today or tomorrow. I forgot as of this recording. But obviously they didn't show off Relink there, the RPG. So this is our fighting game event. So obviously not gonna have Relink there. But they did say at the summer stream, like when I was catching up with the news on it, was like they're gonna show off. They're gonna hold another event for or a stream for specifically for Versus Rising and Relink sometime in September, like September 16th or 18th or something.
Yeah,
Um,
they're traveling around to promote the game.
yeah, they're
One of
doing like
the
they're doing media tours and showing off the games. So
yeah, one of the
we'll see how it
tours is
comes
in Medium
out.
in Las Vegas, wasn't it? So I'm not sure that's part of the
No,
Evo.
I don't. I mean, you're thinking about Evo. Evo's at Las Vegas.
Mm,
So the media tours are gonna be at San Francisco and London.
okay,
So
but yeah, there was all that news for it. Are you interested in any Granblue characters for the fighting game? I mean, Grimner is like literally the most popular character. Even guys would go simp for him. This is Grimner's popularity.
I feel like I care about like having like a decent fighting game first before like I don't really know any Granblue characters outside from like the characters that my friends like and I barely even remember their name and appearance. They just like have to remind me every time.
Yeah,
But I care more about like, hey, are they gonna make the fighting game better? And like based on like the feedback for the closed beta test on Versus Rising, um, they kind of dumbed it down in ways that did not that most people in the community didn't like the actual players who played the first game, they didn't like what they did to the game overall. So they were like, well, we'll make changes to the game based on feedback from the closed network test and or whatever network test they were holding and go from there and see like if they can get that game and J because there's this is gonna be this is gonna suck for the game if they went all they spent all that time, money, and energy to like build the game once again to finally incorporate rollback netcode that literally everyone fucking wanted in the first game, only for that game to come out and like no one likes it. No one likes the actual fighting game itself. So like once again, they burned up a lot of money just
yeah,
for the community to be unhappy in another way.
yeah.
Um,
Like I said, I don't know. From what I played from the original game, it's like I think the original version was the best, and then it just keeps getting worse as they keep patching it. But
I from my understanding, like where the original game left off, like in terms of like all the mechanics they added to the original game, like people were generally, pretty happy with because you can spend more, you can use your super meter in more interesting different ways instead of just using it just for the super itself. Um, but then all the new mechanics that they replaced from the original in Versus Rising, people don't fucking like. They're like, what the fuck is this bullshit?
I
Um,
think from one of the people that are really good at fighting games said that it's like I think one of the things that you try to open up opponents, it's trying to like throw them, but they nerf throws to like completely useless territory. So the
okay,
new system is like
do you know the purple throws from Blaze Blue, Chow?
yeah, I know
So it's
that.
basically that. That's basically, but that's a normal tech window. of
So
the game.
basically, you have a very large time window to get out.
Yes, yeah. So basically, if you it's for those situations like, oh man, like you know, in fighting games, and like you think you tech the throw, but you didn't. Except in this game, like you actually tech the throw, because even though you were like way late, you know.
Like
Like
I
that's
think the
what
problem in
that's
Blaze
one of
Blue is like
that's one of the like, you know, handful of complaints that people had. There's
yeah.
other things.
Like I think the problem, like if you compare it to something like in Blaze Blue, the purple throw, is that sometimes you trying to push buttons and then it thinking that you're trying to, you know, do something and then you can't get out of the purple throw. So that's kind of like the annoying part about the purple throws in Blaze Blue. I'm not sure that applies to in Grand Blue. If you like
But still, like,
kind
yeah,
of
but still the tech, like even if you just like have like, you don't even not like, even if you're just like half paying attention to like like someone grabbing you, you'll still tech out of it. Like, and just throwing her at the moment and versus rising, from what I understand, is a very very weak option. And throws are like kind of like one of like the major pillars in like the rock paper scissors of like a fighting game, right? When you're
yeah. It's like when your opponent is like super smart, you only have like few options. Like, yeah, it's like we can't use the throw.
Yeah,
And now you,
yeah. So
like the whole tech is using the rising strike or whatever it was.
the raging strike, yeah, raging
Yeah.
strike seems to be the stupid mechanic. So we'll see what they do. You know, they have time to fucking fix it up, and hopefully it goes for the best. I mean, this is the fighting game, not the RPG once again.
It's a
But
huge
yeah,
hill to fight on. I mean, you have basically like the best fighting games coming out like this year. Like,
yeah. I mean,
there's things before it. There's more combat in like September. It's like it's a huge hill to fight
yeah,
on.
yeah. This is one of those like times in like fighting games, like you really need to step your game up to like get a crowd and like distinguish yourself as like being really good. Like Street Fighter 6 obviously made a huge impact. Everyone fucking loves it. I still play it like almost every day. Even just like for like even an hour or so, just like kind of because I just like I love just play the game, the act of play the game, and just like it feels gratifying to me, and like in ways I can't even like express properly. You have
And
you have
then there's Under the Night, Rebirth 2, the actual sequel to that with Rollback coming.
Yeah.
But I don't know when that was.
So
release
so
date
yeah,
of that.
so Kamone, like the head of French Red, can no longer get sad at people playing implementing rollback in their own ways, because there was a huge drama uh way back when people implemented rollback into Dengeki Bunko Fighting Climax Ignition through emulator, and that's how people played on that game, because that game used to be on PS3 and PS4 but had delay based netcode. And that game never got officially localized. Only its prequel, Dengeki Bunko Fighting Climax, not Ignition, got officially localized. So Ignition didn't even come out in the outside of Japan at all. And so how people were playing it was like they emulated it, and and then some people reverse engineered it to implement rollback into it. And that word reached Kamone. He got very sad over it. It's like, then how the fuck do you expect people to play it? They're playing a game that's not even officially released in the West. You know, and they're playing it in a way that like that they can play with each other smoothly online, and you're getting sad over that. Like,
Of course, he's getting sad over that.
like,
The pirate version's better than the official game. At that point, it's
I
like,
know, it's like, but like, then then make it make sense. Start like at least make it like sell it in the West. But
I'll tell you this: I will pirate a game if I could play it better. I will do
yeah,
it.
I get it. I don't hold anyone.
It's like
I
if your
don't blame
game runs at
anyone.
like 20 FPS and then the pirate version runs at 60 FPS, I'll pirate it instead.
I don't blame
Simple as
anyone who
that.
does that. Yeah, I mean, that's how you beat piracy. You provide something better than
Yeah,
that option,
it's like
right?
it's not. It's like I have the money. I'm willing to spend it if you give me the best version of the product, right?
Yeah. So
But
I mean,
I
yeah.
don't know.
Getting besides the point. They announced Under Night in Birth to Sis Celeste. For I think, oh god, was it PlayStation, PC, and I think Switch? Yeah.
Xbox never gets to win these
So
indie fighting game titles.
yeah, so that's they announced that it'll have rollback in it. It's gonna have it's a new Under Night game, and if you know what that means, you know what to expect. It'll have the grid system. It'll have some new characters. It'll have the whole existing roster from the last release of it. What's interesting about this one is like I guess this is gonna be going straight to consoles. I don't know if it's getting an arcade release. That's where it's kind of going these days. Where like these new fighting games are not just coming like out to arcades first and then coming to consoles. They're now coming straight to consoles. Like Tekken 8, for example, is being built for consoles It's not coming to arcade first like Tekken 7 was.
I think that's a trend in Japan for quite a long time. It's
Yeah,
like
I mean, yeah, I
it's
mean,
kind of like rare to see
it,
arcade.
it's not really a long time because you really saw like the downfall of arcades. It's already still was on a steady decline, but like COVID really impacted the Japanese arcade market, and
I mean, they do build
and
like
never fully
arcade
recovered
versions
from
like a couple years down the line. Like, was it Street Fighter Five had like an arcade version, like pretty much in the last year of its
Yeah,
of
yes.
its.
I think Street Fighter 6 has an arcade version, but it's not really that prevalent. But they did make an arcade version, and I believe Guilty Gear Strive does as well, but it's not as prevalent.
It's basically like playing a PC version. You have a little USB port in case you want to bring your own joysticks or controllers too. If you don't like
Yeah,
it,
yeah.
but
So
yeah,
I
it's
mean,
definitely a thing now.
the only thing that's like once again still like keeping arcades afloat in Japan is really Gundam Extreme Versus.
Like I think the thing with those arcade versions back then, it's like when you play a fighting game, a good thing about having arcade versions, like people get to test the game, and
Yeah,
whatever's jank is gone in the console release.
and that's what you're kind
And
of you're kind of doing that too now with like kind of have console load tests like Tekken 8 for example. They're starting to like bring that around like at Evo, and there are other other closed tests for Tekken 8. Like the closed network test recently. I think that's kind of their response to like how they hold a load test to games for consoles. Like they're gonna have like a just have like these betas essentially, and that then they'll start. And like we're talking about Granblue versus Rising is doing that as well. Like instead of doing like like an in person load test, they're doing like these online betas, and then they'll also bring out like a build of the game, like to like events like Evo and like that. I think Granblue Rising was also at Anime Expo as well, maybe. And yeah, but it's kind of just like the changing of times, right? Like load tests were super cool, but also there's an
it's a
alternative way
relic
to
of
do
the
this.
past. Sorry, Rip.
Yeah, though I do have a fondness for load tests. Those were fucking cool.
Oh man,
Um, yeah, but I guess okay. So getting back onto the main topic, the Granblue Summer Stream. There's not really much for outside of the mobile game. So what do you want to tell us about what they showed about the mobile game in this summer stream?
the mobile game has a ton of things updated, which is more like they actually have a roadmap plan. This is the first time Granblue actually has a
Wait,
fucking roadmap.
this is the first time they actually revealed a roadmap for that game, like ever
Yes,
since.
they have a roadmap reveal 2 years
Oh,
down the line.
okay.
The saddest part is, it's like, you know how I said like the main story was great,
Uh-huh.
but they didn't update it frequently enough, and
Mhm.
I feel it still suffers from that problem, right? You literally wait, literally like back when COVID hit, you literally wait like a year for 4 chapters, which can be read in like 30 minutes, and everyone's like, "What the hell?" It's like we waited this long for more story, and it's like, "Yeah, we're doing something about it," and the same problem still continues. And in the roadmap, it basically says main story will be updated at the end of this winter, and next year at the end of at the end of summer. I'm like, damn, that story is never gonna be concluded at this rate, or you'll probably forget it by the time it comes out. I feel like when it comes to the main story, it comes out so slow to the point that people kind of like forgot what happened. I asked a friend like that's very hardcore into it. Like even he stops caring about the main story, and then ask him, did he remember any details of the last story? And he's like, I don't, I don't recall. I might have to replay it. No, it's just like it just has gone to that point, right?
Right.
Yeah, but there's a roadmap and lots of new raids and things to existing battles. Like a lot of quality of life fixes, like which kind of like feels that was necessary. They're finally coming at the end of this month. So if you're big into like the mobile game, this is like a saving grace. People that play it a lot.
Okay, give me like kind of like the cliff notes. Like, what are these big quality of life things that like people have been waiting?
There's some characters that have very odd skills where they don't take a turn, and when you're trying to like auto combat, those characters just don't use those zero turn skills. Or some certain characters, like if you level them up, the was it like the 1 turn skills become a 0 turn skill, and it fucks up their rotation. You're doing like full autoing, or maybe some other mechanics too. Like this one character is he doesn't want to go past level 50 because if he goes past level 50, the skill takes 0 turns, and then he's not going to get his debuff refreshed or something like that because he needs to get hit in order to trigger the skill, and that skill is based on the cooldown of your skill, and it's hard to explain it, but I'm just saying, like, in general, it's like you don't want him to be like past this level so that he can maintain at 0 turns to keep like spamming out this debuff. Right.
Okay.
That's kind of like one of the things that they changed for like a quality of life for that. The other way is a lot of the old raids are kind of dead now. People don't join them anymore. They just join like the hardcore raids, and so people see them as like a waste of time. And there's an instant button to skip all of that if like there's something called Omega 2 or Magna 2 depending on what translation you use. The Japanese just calls it Magna. I think Magna is too hard of a word for English, so they just called it Omega in the English version.
Okay.
You could skip all the Omega 2 raids, which is huge for people that, if you're a new player, you can just come in and you can kind of join into the mid game, right? And then there is, like the summons? There's these like summons that you get, which is Grimnir. Grimnir is also a summon that you can get in the game, and I forgot what class they're called, but they're really strong summons. But for the longest time, they never had a full upgrade, and so they got power creep and they kind of become useless. Right? They were like super powerful at one point. Like there was a time where I think Nakamura spent like $3,000 just to get kind of like enough currency to buy it from the shop. If you get what I'm saying.
Oh, I mean, that's not something I should get, but I mean, I kind of get it.
It's like, It's like it reminds me of like the fake Grand Order system. It's like there's no pity for summons, but there is one ticket that lets you redeem anything if you have like accumulate enough like pity kind of things, like Gold Moon.
Okay. We'll say yes. It's not the same, but yes.
Yeah, Gold Moon is a currency you get if you get like a duplicate SSR, right? And then it's like, oh yeah, you could use this currency to shop for things, and you better get a little bit. That's why people hate getting dupes in this game, right? Like the marketing has been very aggressive in this game recently. Maybe there's like a decline on a lot of their IPs, like like Musume is not doing as hot as its first year.
Yeah, like all side games like IP feel like they're down. Like Musume is down. Princess Connect I feel like is down too.
Yeah, I think the thing with Princess Connect is that pity used to be 300 in that game, right? And then they changed it to 200, and the community fucking loves it. But if you look at the revenue, it dropped by like 50%. So I'm not sure if that system is ever going to get implemented in Granblue, because Granblue really needs that. There's so many characters. It's kind of like impossible to get what you want as an endgame player unless you.
Well, what is like the general mood on Granblue? Like, I feel like we talk about it year after year, right? Like, is it like steadily going down? Is it up? Is it like a roller coaster?
It feels like a roller coaster. It's like every time they do something good, they do something stupid. But I feel like, I don't know. It's like I feel the biggest hurt is around 2021. I feel like that's the year that they lost a lot of the player base. It's like they do a silent approach and they don't do anything, and everyone kind of like start to was like, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? And they just say, just be patient. It's kind of like
it's like because these mobile games have been long in the tooth right now, and I think it's one of those things. Like it's just like it's inevitable you find this problem of like, okay, we've been going on for so long. What do we do from here on out? Like I remember there's like a Famitsu survey for Fate Grand Order that came out in the latest issue this past week, and they're celebrating its 8th anniversary in Japan. And like usually for the anniversary events, Famitsu does their survey on like the Japanese player base on like how do you feel about this game right now. Like what an interesting question that popped up is like what do you want like the development staff to do now that like the latest story arc has been pretty much concluded. Right now there's this story arc Cosmos and the Lost Belt that's pretty much kind of went its course. It's the final part of that arc came out late, like either earlier this year or very late last year in Japan, and now they're like once again like in this intermission arc where it's like it's not quite a full story arc. It's kind of like a transition over to whatever the next thing is. That's what it feels right now for that game, and like over like around like maybe 52% of like there's people who responded to that survey said, oh, we want them to continue the main story to part 3. We want to see more of the main story. But an interesting one is like 16% of the people who responded is like, we just want this to end, like end of service the game, and then like there's like other responses to it of like, hey, I just want like like make an FGO too, but like make everything like transfer over or something, or like a new protagonist. And like
I wish
there's
that was a
others.
thing for Granblue. I wish that was it. You know, the new story
Mhm.
arc has been dragging a lot.
Mhm.
It's like okay, the entire premise of Granblue is at the beginning is the main character trying to find their father, right? And you know, every time you get to like the island, it's like, oh, your father was here 20 years ago or something. It's like, yeah, he went to this next destination. It just keeps going on and on and on. And it's like he's never gonna meet the father at this point, right? And you're like, yeah, it's like just meet the father. It's like sometimes it doesn't needs to be
Yeah,
the end goal.
for all the faults that like FGO has, like at least it's able to end things conclusive. Like the end of the first arc, like you could end the game right there and still have like a conclusive, satisfying conclusion to like everything. Like because everything that happens after, like it's not really super bolted up, but it's like it's the start of a new thing, like a hard start to a new thing. Like everything
Like
from the past, like they were able to like end on their own terms conclusively. Here are the next things that like they don't super drag themselves out, and like and all the main story and like the main story arc that came after it, like people generally really love it. Like as it's gone through, it's like each chapter of that story, like people have really liked. And you'll find like opinions usually split between like what their favorite arcs is in there as well. So like it kind of really sucks for the Granblue fan base who like want this story to like go anywhere and find some sort of conclusion. To, like it just feels like they keep getting dragged by the feet. Like I think the only story arc I ever hear about Granblue is like what makes the sky blue. That's it.
that's an event story. It's not even a main
Yeah,
story.
yeah.
That's the thing. It is one of the best events for sure. But like the main story is okay. The main story, the beginning, the first arc has a very slow start. It doesn't get people hyped until at least you get past the fourth island, and that's a very hard sell to somebody. It's like you need to play at least 6 hours into the story before it gets good, and the anime ends before where it gets good as well. So it's just like okay, it's very hard to sell people on that. But when they made the second arc was some hype ass story. I fucking love the second arc. It has everything in there. It's like very exciting battles. Like over the top villains, like everything. It just keeps going on, and when it ended, you're like, oh my god, that was such a good story arc. And then the third arc, it was like, what do they want to take the story from here? It's like all over the place. You could, like one of the part, it's like you infiltrate like the emperor, and in order to infiltrate the empire, you had to attend the school and pretend to be the students of his academy. But the school has some magical rules that you can't break, so your powers are useless here. And then there's that arc, and then next arc is like you're in like a bar party where people wear this mask and they have like a hive mind, and then it goes all over the place. And now it's a time loop doing things, so everyone's like, "What is going on with the third arc?" You know, it's like I don't know. It's like
Yeah.
very on focus, I would say.
All right. Well, is there anything else you want to report from this summer stream?
Only if you're into like the mobile game. I mean, there's merchandise too. If you guys care about merchandise, you can
No,
buy the.
I don't. I don't.
Yeah,
I care about the RPG that will theoretically release one day. Um, it's in some year.
but yeah, if you're not into the mobile game, it's hard to kind of like sell you on what's here. Like, there's gonna be an Omega free raid at the next anniversary.
Woo, finally! Thank you, Chow. Time for me to install because of the
Yeah,
Omega
Omega
3.
free. That means that you have to regrind your entire weapon grids again because now everyone's using a new set of weapons. I don't know. I don't know how they could like make things even more power crept than they already
I don't
are.
know if you're really selling it to all.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like, yeah, new content, new stuff. I don't know how where to take it from here because everybody thought like certain battles are impossible back in the day. There's no way in hell you could solo that, and somehow Power Creep made it. Oh wait, you could just solo it by leaving the game on full auto now. You know, I don't know. It's just like, what is it?
Stay tuned for maybe something cool about Granblue in, I don't know, a month or two.
I mean, you got
Apparently.
Nier from the fighting game. She looks like Relius Clover with that when she summons death all the time.
Now there's only one year I know. Well, technically two, I guess, but it ain't that. That's for sure. It's either a brother or a papa variant. That's the only year I know.
Damn, I prefer the brother. Sorry.
Well, there's no right answer to this, but there's only the well, any other Nier besides those two. I don't know, and I don't care.
The next thing we have listed here is something that I hadn't seen before. It's called Reverse 1999, as in, like, I assume the year, but I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
So, Josh, what is Reverse 1999?
So I got into this closed beta test that I can talk about for an upcoming mobile slash PC game called Reverse 1999. It has a pretty interesting premise and story presentation. I think the thing that really caught my eye about this game, because I was seeing like an early trailer, like that initially released in China a few months back. There was like a long lead up like marketing cycle for this game, and like one of the interesting things about this Chinese release, it has full English voice acting already incorporated into it, but not full English text. So like technically, you can play like the Chinese version of the game and still understand it because everything is voiced in English in it, even though the text will read like in Chinese. Which is a very interesting thing. Like I don't think I've ever seen that out of a game. And also like it's a very I don't want to say it's like the Xenoblade approach, but it's a very pomp English voice acting. Like it's very British.
You know what that
Um,
reminds me of? It reminds me of like importing Kingdom Hearts Final Mix as a kid, because those games are only dubbed in English only because
yeah,
that's like their definitive edition or whatever in their mind,
yeah,
and you can switch to Japanese dubbing, but
y-
that's also
yeah,
a way to understand the game when it's all in Japanese because you have the
right,
English dub, right?
yeah. So I've been playing it for a day or two here. Like so this closed beta test is only gonna go on for like maybe a week or so, and then who knows till like the full release in the full English release anyway. But the story premise is basically you play as this timekeeper named Verton, and it's actually a protagonist named protagonist, their own personality. They're actually a character in the story. They're not a silent protagonist. Um, there is a phenomenon in the world called the storm, and in the year 1999, this is when the storm first appeared, and it basically swept up and consumed a time period, an era, and reverse time. Um, so when you start the story, you're actually you get introduced to like this radio host in the mid 60s named Regulus, and as she's doing her radio hosting program, like an unknown organization starts attacking her, and she's like radio hosting her like from a boat. It's like a very peculiar um sort of setting, and I think they're like I forgot exactly where they were. I think they're like somewhere in in the European Isle, maybe London. I'm not sure. Um, and a storm is approaching that time period in the mid 1960s. You are Burton, and you are assisted by this um, character named Sonetto, I believe, and she's part of a more formal organization that recruits talented people called Arcanists, and it's to make the easiest comparison, it's like FF16 of people who have like magic and they have the capability of doing magic. Um, and you're like chasing after to recruit Regulus and like trying to protect her from this organization that's after her as well. You fend them off, and you notice that Regulus doesn't has her own reservations about like joining this mysterious organization and so forth. And you kind of get some back and forth in between them as you're trying to kind of chasing down Regulus, who is kind of warped into like another part of town because she was using this artifact to warp around. Eventually, you catch up with her out of Sonetto's eye, and you're basically trying to tell Regulus, "Hey, you don't have to join the organization right now. I just want you to come with me to avoid this storm because I can tell that you see like these irregularities in this time period, and you see that like raindrops are like falling in reverse, so they're going back up, and you like no ordinary person can see like the effects of the storm incoming. So after you're able to fool Sonetto into not being able to find Regulus, you find out that there's a pocket dimension that Verton carries around her briefcase. So she basically stuffs Regulus and herself inside this suitcase right before the storm hits, and that time period gets consumed. And then this is kind of where you get your exposition when you enter like this hideout inside Verton's suitcase, where it's kind of like a like this space, like kind of like this. It almost looks like a fancy hotel lobby almost, and you're telling her about like um the environment that you've crafted here because it's like a lot of like like when you're like in an investigation, you have like this whole pin-up board of like images and text, and you have like you're drawing lines across them with like yarn and trying to link things together. It's sort of like that, and like paperwork everywhere. You're telling Regulus, this is what's happening. This is the storm, and who you are as the timekeeper, and you're kind of like a record keeper of sorts of like the beginning and end of eras, and like and recruiting talented arcanists to like kind of like basically because she feels lonely from this as well, and like she every person that she's tried to like stuff into this suitcase, they eventually disappeared because of the effects of the storm. Like like even though she made friends, they couldn't see the storm, and eventually the effects of the storm or whatever time phenomenon, we haven't really gone into it yet, kind of makes them disappear. And like yeah, this was the last time I was going to try it because Regulus was like the one person that she found that like can see the effects of the storm coming, and like it seems to be successful. So you're telling her about how this phenomenon first occurred in 1999, and then brought her. I don't know. There's like a time between 1999 and another thing, but then she eventually ended up in the mid 60s, and then after this, the first chapter of the game, you get swept up in the 1929 Chicago, and then um, like the whole story chapter there is you're observing what is going on in Chicago. Like there's this whole discrimination between humans and Arcanists there. So it's not unlike what you would see like FF16 in terms of like how the discrimination undertone and the theme, the thematic messaging is. But like the aesthetics of it is very like um very like old English, like lots of like of suits, lots of top hats, and it's trying to tell the story of like how there's like this antagonistic organization is also recruiting Arcanists, but they're for more nefarious deeds and so forth. So you're kind of recounting like the steps of like how the stock exchange in America was like opening up, and how does that reflect to the times in terms of like how discrimination is being dealt with in between like normal humans and Arcanists, and how does the economy of that world feed into that conflict. Um, so it's hard to really describe without you seeing it, but like the art style of this game, the overall presentation is very, very captivating and done very well. Like I was really surprised by like how much I was kind of like just I soaked in the story, and like I just that's kind of like one of my main motivation of like trying this game, and I'm really glad to like see that like even like the early parts of the story, I'm not super far deep into it, is like it's all very, very interesting because it's kind of mixing like time shenanigans with some of the supernatural, with some more shady under dealings of like like underground dealings. Like at some point there are some characters that like find truth serum in an experiment, and like and how that correlates to like to the background of a family between what like the early antagonists that you come across, because like her own circumstances were pretty dire for her family, and like why was her mother like what was she either what was her family doing, or what was her mother doing to like make her give a better life for her children, essentially, because one of the early antagonists that you meet is like part of like I think like an orphanage of some sorts as well. So it kind of has like a very, very story heavy uh like undertone to it, like in terms of like how why things happen. It's very much like you have to pay attention to the story, and I really like that like all the time period um assets they kind of put into place. Like sometimes like if you want to get to like the next story node, there'll be like other side things they have to engage with the environment. So some of them could be just to be like newspapers and what they're talking about in the 1920s, and like what were the popular topics around that time period in that place of the world. One of these mini activities you do before you go to the next story node is like almost a miniature like choose your own adventure type of like story dealing, where there's like a narrator telling you the story, and you kind of choose the response that you want to see like the next like part of the story on. But it's flesh it but that story that the choose your own adventure that it's telling is like part of the background of the antagonist's like family that it's like presenting to you, which is a pretty interesting way to like kind of present that sort of like minor background details of like to give more context of like what is exactly happening here. In terms of like character design, this game has some of the most bizarre character designs I've ever seen. Like this does have a gacha system, which is unfortunate, but I get it. But like the very first thing that like I pulled in this game was a straight up UFO, like just like a saucer, an alien saucer. Its name is Alien T, and it's just a fucking UFO. One of them is like a performer named Betty, and she has like a big cowboy hat with like a fake mustache. Um, One of them is Poltergeist, and it's just basically like a shy girl, like a ghost overrobe, like over her. While another one is like a 2-star, like it's called Door, and it's just kind of like a shard, like it looks like a shard of glass. It's called Door. It's I'll probably when I do a write up on this closed beta and like what kind of summarizing what I've been talking about here and like how much it's impressed me. I'll probably include a gallery of like some of the character designs of this game because it is bizarre. Like these character designs, like there's one character named TTT in all caps, and she's literally three like three old TVs stacked up against each other, but the different parts of her body. So the top TV is her head, the middle TV is like her chest area with like what she's wearing, and then like the bottom TV is like the skirt and like a little bit of her legs that shows on top of it. It's like to form like an image of her, and I'm just like, what the fuck is going on? I don't understand. And there's another character named John Titor or Titor. I believe this is like referencing like like a character in history that like had to do like something with time travel experiments. But they only speak in numbers and letters. That's all they say is numbers and letters. I don't. It's not even binary code. It's not just ones and zeros. It's like a random assortment of numbers and letters, and it's all voice acted. I'm like, that's all they fucking say. I'm like, I don't fucking understand. But it's so bizarre and weird, and like, there's something really captivating and cool about that.
I'm on the website right now, and it looks like, I hope I'm understanding this right, there's a character that's just like a floating pair of gauntlets.
Yeah. Well, one of the early characters that you meet that's with Regulus is like a floating apple, a floating talking apple that wears a bow tie, and it's named Apple, but like almost all in caps except the letter E. That's the only one that's under like undercase. And like, why? I don't understand, but it's deliberate, and it's so fucking weird. But it's really funny, and I'm just like that. Any game that decides like, you know what, we should just go fucking all out with our character designs. I'm like, just make them as weird and as bizarre as possible. And I was like, and it works. It caught my eye. I'm like, holy shit, what the fuck is happening? So, yeah, and the battle system is like your standard turn-based battle system. Like your enemies are at the left, facing your characters at the right. You can have up to 4 characters, and it's kind of like a card battle system where like there are cards. They're like buff cards, debuff cards, and attack cards depending on your character's like card layout. And like if there are 2 cards that are by each other, let's say like a 1-star attack card that's at the exact same time as the other 1-star attack card by it, they merge together to enhance its effects, and so forth. So like that part of the game is kind of like straightforward and simple. I wonder if there's more mechanics to it, but right now it's like your standard turn-based kind of card battle system of like merging cards to enhance your effects. Then there's like ultimate effects, and obviously there's like this whole elemental weaknesses system that you play around as well for like to switch up your party compositions. But yeah, that's what I've been looking into besides Baldur's Gate 3. Now, when I find the time, like probably near when the closed beta is almost over, I'll probably do a write up on it. And kind of give people like a kind of a look at like what the game's all about. It's just really pretty and really, really well presented. Like
Yeah, the art on the website's really nice.
Yeah, and that's just something that's like throughout the whole game. Like the background art is vibrant and it's very atmospheric. Yeah, so I would suggest that like when the game comes out, like I would suggest like even if you're not into these types of games, like kind of just like look at the intro and like kind of be the first few chapters and see like if that'll be up your alley. It's I'm not gonna say it's gonna be like an all timer, but it's really impressive for like just a brand new IP to come out and like just to really captivate me from the get go because of the strength of its characters and presentation and voice acting alone. And that just I always commend a game to just come out swinging like that. It's like, oh wow, there's something really really cool that it's going for here, and I'm like, I dig it. I really dig it.
Zhao, did you want to talk about? We talked about this a little bit last week, the official release in English for the visual novel White Album, and how you said, "Oh, I only really want to support this because I really want to get the sequel in English." But you've been playing, as far as I know, the release of White Album. Are you still kind of as lukewarm on it as you thought, or like how's your time with it? The official version release so far.
I haven't got to the interesting parts of the games yet, but if anybody recall, this is the 2010 version, not the OG version that's released way back in the day. I feel like there's people that are on Steam that are complaining for the wrong reason. It's like, where's the plus 18 patch? It's like there is no plus 18 content in this version. Okay, there never was. So you're never gonna get it because
Then it's the censored version. Ugh. Yeah, people are always gonna be like that. People are stupid. They must have their porn no matter what. Even though you can get it fucking anywhere on the internet.
You know what? Aqua Plus, when they did when they had the ecchi scenes for like Uta Robbery Rumino, those are just a waste of time. It's better to have them cut out. Basically, I'll vouch for that any day.
Ah, Chow, are you saying you're pro censorship?
No, I'm not pro censorship.
So it's okay. So tell me about this release. Like how are the PC options? How's the localization shaping up? Like kind of this early
The
impressions.
localization is kind of hit or miss. There's some odd dialogues that I've come across too, which is kind of weird. I'll explain it in just a second. As for like controls, I'm actually using a PS1 controller on playing this game.
All right.
It has controller support for a visual novel, which is kind of rare in my opinion, right? Right, I feel.
I mean, with Steam input, it's getting more and more common because you just go to Steam input.
But yeah, I'm using a hacked PS1 controller that's wireless to play on my PC because
a Premiere experience.
It works. It's like all the buttons are there. Everything works. Very handy. But the translation part is kind of like there's this one part where you meet Rena's older brother. And she and her brother's having an argument, and she's basically calling her like Rina-chan, right? And the translation didn't want to call her. They didn't want to use the suffix, the Japanese suffix, like Rina-chan. They want, the honorific. They didn't want to use that, and he keeps calling her doll for the chant in the translation.
Like Rina doll.
Yeah, there's one part it's like Rina doll, and the next one's like I'm not your doll. And that's what you said. Like, I'm not your doll, but it's like, but what you said in Japanese, like, it's like, don't stop using Chan on me or something,
Yeah, that's weird. Yeah, I don't know if I would. That's always a tricky thing with localization. Like, if you're very adamant about not using the honorifics, then like, what you decide to substitute it with for your localization is always
could be weird.
Yeah, it's always going to be weird because honorifics is like it's not something you can like elegantly like translate back into English.
I say they should just keep the honorifics because it takes place in Japan.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Only in Japanese voices, so
and that's your target audience too, right?
Like, so just keep it intact. I would say at that point, right?
Yeah, it's kind of like Atlas's like fucking thing with Persona of like them trying to like should we keep honorifics in our localizations of Persona or not, and like they've been kind of itching away from that as time has gone on.
Like maybe if they dubbed it, it's like then maybe you could drop the honorifics. And some translation gets kind of lost using that when you watch like certain animes. Like let's just say for a Gundam, for example, Gundam Age. There's one part where was it Dessel referred to this, I forgot the other guy, and basically in Japanese is Oni-chan. It's like, how's it going, Denzel Oni-chan, or something like that. So I know their relationship, they're brothers, but they never call each other brothers in the in the fucking subtitle, like because the subtitle dropped that and it's called on a first name basis. So and when I was watching the English version, I didn't even know they were fucking related.
So I have two examples of this like translation thing. Sometimes you just have to write around it where you're not necessarily substituting it, but you're kind of giving the same intent. And sometimes it is more of a substitution. One that's pretty common, I think, is you'll have a character say something like, "That's Mr. So and so to you," which in Japanese is they're emphasizing the san.
The san, yeah.
Yeah.
I think there was a part like that.
Like they call me san or sama or whatever. But I remember one game, it was actually a dungeon crawler from experience, where your sister character, there's no context, is falling down a pit. And she reaches up with her hand and she says in Japanese, "Oni-chan." Like she's calling out to him. The translation to that is "help me." That's obviously not the translation to Oni-chan, but that's the intent. Like she's asking for help. Like she's calling for help. So, if you're not going to use the honorific, you kind of have to write around it with that intent, and obviously that's very tricky.
Yeah, and it's always going to be like fighting uphill, like trying to get people to understand, like the localization is like about like getting the meaning across, not necessarily the line by line, one by one across. In that perspective, because like Japanese to English and even English to Japanese, it's just a fucking nightmare. These both of these languages are like so incompatible with like the like even like. But even when you're trying to strip away just like the text, like the culture behind them, their language is crafted because of like the culture that raised them.
I don't know. From my experience with Japanese, it's like a very bare bones language. You have to fill in the blanks. It'll be like they don't explain anything.
It's very context driven. Yeah. It's the onus is up to like it's not up like to people interpreting the text. It's up to the people who can read the situation, which will get the meaning across.
Yeah, they keep filling in. It's like okay, basically when someone say "doko" as in like where, but that could ask like in so many contexts, and it's like what is using that "doko" for? Like where are you? Where where am I?
Yeah,
it could be anything, right? So you had to like read the context to get the proper translation, and that's why it's like the translation is never like word for word or accurate to be exact, right?
Yeah, that's why there's like a lot of like sometimes like in like for games, for example, like what the text box that you're seeing is not necessarily what they're saying at that time because because of the context around it. You can't just like where you decide to like place that text in English can vary up what you mean. Like if you say something earlier than what you mean, it'll have a very very different meaning than what you could say that thing later, and depending on what you said before, it can have a very different meaning.
Yeah.
So it's tricky.
But yeah, I wish there was options to mod honorifics back. But the only model that's in the community right now is the text box when all the characters are talking.
Yeah.
There's a hack to get rid of the white album text that's pasted on the text box that's kind of transparent. That's the only hack that's available. It's like
that's
why
weird.
would
like a watermark?
Yeah, like a watermark of like white album in the text box, right?
That's so weird. Why would he?
It's like some people want to get rid of that. I'm like, okay.
Is that distracting? Is it distracting? Like
that's distracting, but there is a mod to get rid of that, I guess, in the Steam community. I guess people didn't like that.
And the game's not dubbed, right?
The game's not dubbed.
So to me, like if I hear, even if I don't understand Japanese, if I hear them saying sensei or chan or whatever, but then the text doesn't capture that, I would get distracted.
Yeah, you probably would. Like, yeah, like I first thing in the nose is like that Rena doll. What the hell is he talking about? Oh, he's saying Rena-chan. It's like, oh god.
Like I don't know if this is the best example, but I guess in the original subtitles of like Yakuza 3, they replaced all the Aniki with brother, but then when they redubbed it, they just kept it Aniki, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right. But because it matched the what was actually being spoken, so I wasn't pulled out of the moment.
And even if you don't know Japanese, you pretty much get the meaning really quickly.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and like even in the context of that, like him saying brother there, like it's like it makes sense,
It would make sense in that context. But yeah, like that's about like what the translation is. Like I like without the honor fix, I feel the translation is okay. I mean, certain dialogue, it's like I feel like the characters might not capture the tone perfectly, but you know,
Does this make you worried for if they ever decide to do White Album too?
not totally worried, but I feel like if they do too, I hope they put the honor fix back. At least that's my expectation, at least.
That's a big expectation.
Yeah,
If
or some hacker can mod it back. I mean, they always bitch about no 18 content. Well, how about you do a mod to patch this back in? Something we
yeah,
did.
are there like ongoing efforts in the community that you can see to like kind of like well, what sort of things in the community are they planning to do to mod it?
I'm not sure. I haven't checked that far in, but that was the only hack I found back when I checked it yesterday. But hey, the game only came out like yesterday, was it? Or is it 2 days ago? Yeah, two
Like two
days
days
ago.
ago. Yeah, just give it time. You
Give
know,
it time. Something
so
will come
you know,
out.
so you have like the graphical mods. You know,
Yeah, but anyways, let's dive more into the game itself. So, this is the remake version, right? So it doesn't have like the still background portraits for the characters anymore. They've all been like redesigned, and it's kind of like an early, was it? It's like an early live 2D kind of appearance for the characters. If you get what I'm saying, like
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
characters kind of like they're
It's, uh,
moving, but they're not like sometimes it's kind of janked.
it's like puppet almost like
Yeah, like a puppet kind of movement, and then their lip flaps will always move when they talk. But sometimes it's like when they have like that pose, they kind of end in a weird, talking
yeah.
animation. Like it's okay, like it looks good. It's just like sometimes it's just like some frames don't convey.
You just have to understand that like this is not like a modern development game.
Yeah,
It's not it's a
that's
mod. It's pretty old in the grand scheme
yeah.
of things.
But let's see what is there to compare it from? Like I think the best comparison to this game is the other game from Aqua Plus, which is Two Heart 2. If you ever played that visual novel, it's like a rom com from them. It's like one of the more popular series. Uh, rom was it Two Heart 2 system is like there's like a schedule system, and how this game goes is that uh we need probably the story first. Basically, the main character has a lot of jobs, and basically he and his girlfriend got into the idol business, and now she's like super popular and she can't really spend much time with him. And then as the game progresses, he needs to like find like several jobs to while maintaining his college life. And now the game kind of opens up with the schedule system, and you basically had to like talk to characters to get them open up. And if you have this knowledge, you can talk to this topic with the other characters, and that's kind of like how the gameplay goes. Uh, Basically, if you don't know about this person, you can't really bring up like that topic to the other person to unlock that person's route. Kind of like that's how the whole gameplay system is. Trying to explain the first White Album. Uh, Josh, did you remember playing the first one too much or not really?
Not really. I mean, I never really play. I've been a tiny bit of White Album one, but like I saw the anime.
Yeah, the anime is kind of like the same idea, but I
Yeah.
think the anime is a little bit more focused. So I feel like if the anime dragged out, it would be a little harder to get your attention here. But I feel like in a video game format, I think it works out a little bit better because you're not driven to boredom like the main character is. Like in the anime, you can kind of pick where you want to go, right?
Yeah, I
So
mean, yeah. I mean, the anime was unhinged in like multiple ways, but one of the things that comes across is like that this dude just does a lot. He's kind of a dumbass too. Like that's
yeah,
the one thing I remember.
he is a dumbass.
That's kind of the one thing I remember from White Album One is like the main character that you play is just like he's just oh man, he's kind of insufferable.
But I feel like that's a problem with like all the White Album games. It's just like your first option isn't always the best. So always go for the affair, guys. Always go have affair.
Hey,
Okay.
but like,
Okay.
but the story of White Album One is very straightforward. Like that's kind of like its main gimmick is like,
It's
hey,
very straightforward. It's just like it starts out with, yeah, his girlfriend is like, she got into the idol business. Now she's super popular. Doesn't have time to spend with him, and then now he's trying to like find what he should do, and you kind of like trying to like interact. I think what really comes into the picture that makes it that shakes things up is was it there's a very popular idol named Brina, and was it the main character's girlfriend is working with her, and when she comes in the picture, like this whole dynamic between the main characters has completely shifted when she comes into the picture, right? And that's kind of like the same thing in the sequel too. The main character's dating this girl, and then was it they recruited a third member, which is a prodigy in the music business, and when she comes into the picture, their whole dynamic changes, and how you see these characters interact. It's kind of like, huh? It's like maybe I don't know them too well, or maybe this is kind of like that stuff. And I feel like the thing that makes the White Album series is really good is that it doesn't focus on it doesn't try to dwell too much on high school romance. It's a more kind of mature kind of romance if you think about it. Like a lot of romance don't really focus on like, breakups, and then when you rekindle that relationship and how that would work out. Maybe it's a problem to keep going, but you still chose to rekindle it anyways.
Yeah. A lot of them is more about the pursuit of it, not necessarily like the fallout of it.
Yeah. So it's like, and a lot of games don't really focus on that, right? Everyone likes to talk about romance stories like, hey, they end up together, everything's all happy ever after, right? And romance usually don't really always work out that way, right?
Right.
There's a lot of hardships to go through, right? But anyways, that's my take on White Album. I feel the port is great. I mean, I'm not sure like how much of enhancement that they did to it, but it feels great in my end, except for some translation awkwardness that I see so far from what I get from the beginning of the game. But I'm buying this so I can get the second one in English in some official capacity. So
Okay, you went above it beyond. You actually booted the game instead of just like buying to get White Album 2. You went above and beyond by double clicking the executable and being like, "Yep, this is a real product."
maybe I could get Too Hard 2 as well. That's Octopus's famous rom com. Has a lot of famous VAs in that game, and so is this game. Okay, so I think because 2 has some. I'm not trying to. I can't remember. Does 2 has some ecchi scenes?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I remember they have some ecchi scenes. So I think like in the second one, the voice actors are like not as like top A list compared to the first remake, because they got rid of the ecchi scenes and now they have like nothing but like top tier VAs. I mean, this is like the A list at the time, right? I mean, you get was it Nana Mitsuki, Romy Park, Aya Hirano, was it Haruka Tomatsu? Like the A list is all in this game. While Right Album 2 doesn't have like the A list. I mean, the main girl in that one's voiced by the. What is it? Do you remember the teacher from Persona 3? I mean, not Persona 3, the Persona 4? The replacement teacher that comes in after King Moron dies?
Vaguely.
Miss Kua, something Kua.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone else remembers.
I don't remember her name, but she replaced King Moron, and everyone's like, "Oh my god, that teacher is a menace," But yeah, they don't have like the
Isn't
like.
that Persona 4?
Yeah, Persona 4. Yeah,
Okay.
like that.
I vaguely remember this character. She's sort of like really lazy and sort of maybe a drunk. I don't know.
Yeah, she was. I think she was in Persona 3 in the Operation Babe Hunt part. Like later on in Portable, they confirmed that she was there as one of the targets that the boys can hit on. But yeah. So
Well,
yeah.
now when White Album 2 is announced, we can say thank you, Chow, for your
Yeah,
investment.
thank you, Chow. Yeah.
I buy you guys all a copy to say you guys supported it too.
Don't do that. I'll eventually pick it up. Not right now because I'm playing
Yeah,
other
same.
games, but I'll eventually pick it up.
And with that, 2 hours in, we'll go into the news section of this podcast. Now, the news section here is pretty light. A few headlines. The main event that we have a couple things to talk about was the ChinaJoy 2023 event, where Sony had a presence with their China Hero project. We have one game that we have been looking at least keeping an eye on for the last several years, and then one new announcement there that we'll talk about and keep an eye on from this point going forward. But before we go into that, we're going to talk about a game that we've talked about previously on this podcast in a lot of different contexts, but probably not in the last year or so. And that is Fantasian. So anyone that's been following this site for a long time kind of knows that, speaking generally, painting with a wide brush, a lot of us here thought pretty highly of Fantasian. We gave it our RPG of the year for 2021. However, that was with kind of this caveat that it was an Apple Arcade subscription exclusive. As of right now, that is still the case. Nothing has been announced. However, we've had some conversations, some comments from Sakaguchi previously about how he would like to develop a PC port for Fantasian. And kind of following up on that stated desire, Fantasian did show up on Steam database as a Fantasian playtest. So not an official announcement of any, in any means, but potentially an indication that Fantasian is on its way to Steam in the near future. So, how do we feel about this? We've all kind of already played it. So for us,
I can
individually,
play it without
you
buying
haven't played
Apple
it.
Arcade.
Okay, well, one, this is really cool. Two, the banner image on the SteamDB looks like a shit post, which is fucking hilarious. Because it's literally just the Fantasian like logo with like the App Store and the Google Play Store like banners underneath it, but they're both crossed out. Like, but you can clearly see them there. They're just like, it's like someone like scribbled like a cross out "Do not enter" fucking thing over them. So it looks like a shit post, but it's real. It's a real DB entry. I assume.
Well, I'll be honest, the main reason why I haven't really said anything about this whole thing is that anyone can make a Steam database entry. Anyone can say that their app is a specific thing. And based off that image being like you described, looking like a shit post, I mean, Sakaguchi has said, oh, we might make a PC version, so it might happen. But I am not convinced that this is actually real yet.
Yeah. I need a more official like announcement of like this is actually real, because it's like yes, this DB entry like it does exist. It's just like, but it looks so borderline fake. That's like, I don't know what to think. Like they definitely they have like the library image too. That's like a taller picture as well in it. But it's like, okay, like it's cool if this is happening. I am all for it happening. I really hope this is real.
I can't wait for people to play the PC version of this game, and it's not at all what they expect this game to be.
So
Yeah.
everybody here has finished it except for me? Is that how it goes for this game?
Yeah, I finished
Maybe.
it. Yeah. So,
Damn, I feel left out here. But am I left out here just because I didn't want to pay for Apple Arcade?
No, you're smart. I mean, look, if this comes out on PC, then you're automatically smart because you didn't pay hundreds of dollars for an Apple TV that multiple people on staff here did, which we paid hundreds of dollars for an Apple TV to play this game. Like, if this comes out on PC, you're automatically the smartest person, one of the smartest people on staff. If it doesn't, then maybe you're left out.
I mean, Chow already kind of was there, considering he doesn't use Twitter.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, fuck.
Or X, or whatever that is.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
X-Men. No, wait, wrong product.
But yeah, man, fuck, you made so many good decisions in your life. I'm jealous. But yeah, I mean, cool that this is real. I guess that's the only thing we can really say about it, right? It's like, that's cool that this is potentially maybe a thing.
We'll keep an eye on it, and I am kind of curious, like how Adam suggested that. We all talk about how this game is. We all thought really highly of it, but kind of in a specific context where
It's sort of an acquired taste.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think even James's review, his basic thesis is, I love this game, but I only recommend it to a small subset of people.
Yeah, I think a lot of people will get caught off guard. Like they'll hear like the buzz about it, or like, hey, it's from a new Mistwalker or Sakaguchi, but I think they'll get caught off guard by like what kind of game it is. I think they won't even really know until like 20 hours into it what they're really signing up for.
Once they hit that second part.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember seeing comments on my reviews saying this doesn't sound like a 9, and it's like, no, I mean, I really do enjoy it that much that I'd give it a 9, but it's also one of those things where it's, if you're looking for a classic Final Fantasy game, there's some of that here, but it's also very much the hardest RPG I played that year. No sugarcoating it.
Yeah. It might still be
grind, and you'll be fine.
I might that like, if I remember, like I'm thinking like, have I played an RPG as hard as that since then? I'm like, I don't think so.
Is
I'm
it
joking, 'cause
harder
that
than
game doesn't let
7
you grind.
Saga?
Saga's not hard.
No, 7 Saga. That's
Oh,
not
7 Saga. Oh,
not the same. Yeah,
yeah.
man, that's a game that nobody remembers.
It is the sort of game where, of course, it's turn based, where once you know like the strategy to beating a boss, you always feel like you win when you only have like 2 turns of slack left before things fall
Yeah.
apart.
Yep.
That's how it feels like when you implement a strategy and you win by the skin of your teeth, and that's every single boss fight in the second half. If you don't even implement the strategy, you will just get curb stomped, and you can't grind because it has that
Yeah,
Mistwalker.
yeah. I was sort of being facetious, but this is not the sort of game because the sort of I don't remember specifically, but it's your levels are kind of capped in a way, or your EXP like gain goes down a lot. Like it doesn't really let you grind and just overpower by grinding, so you have to do the strategy. So
That reminds me of doing like this mode in Granblue called Pride of Descendants, where you fight like these super endgame bosses as like a challenge, and you're given like this cap, so you can't really cheese your way through with money and whaling, I guess. So it's like you're stuck with these limits, which sounds kind of like my kind of thing because that's the kind of challenge I like to do.
Okay, I have a question for that. Is it actually like a predefined party that they give you for it?
No, you still have to get the party, but they have like they give you like certain limits. Like this one boss, it's like you can only use 9 skills.
Okay, but
And
you still have to roll the characters
yeah,
for that.
sadly, and people
Okay.
trying to think like free to play solutions to get through it, and the non free to play solutions to get through it. But it's a mode that I like, even though people kind of hate those kind of challenge modes. Even Epic 7 has certain things like that too, but they got rid of it because people bitch about it being way too hard, and now they don't even add that
I mean,
mode anymore.
that's an ongoing thing with like not even just mobile games, which is like people in general like like when they see like when they see a game that's like intrinsically inherently like challenge is part of its design, like a lot of people just like kind of bounce off. It's like, oh fuck no, dude, I don't play games to get challenged.
Like one of the bosses, like in that Granblue example, is like, okay, imagine this. This boss will kill someone guaranteed, and it will always target the person with the highest health. And usually in most RPGs, your main character is always the strongest person with the highest stats, right? You know, and then so your main character is always gonna die. So you try to like manipulate the boss to kill someone else instead of your main character because your main character is your most useful character, so you can't let the main character die. So you're like trying to adjust your heals to make sure that someone has a little bit more HP than the main character, so that the boss will one shot them instead. And then you're trying to manipulate a system like that. And then there's something like that. You know, I'm not sure if they would do something like that in Fantasian. It's like, oh, trying to trick this boss into killing someone else first, so that you can use the strongest member alive to kill
Well,
it.
it's not really like that in Fantasy. It's not like a lot of like pre-programmed like but like death conditions. But there's a lot of like tricky situations in Fantasian where you have to actually like actively like pay attention to like the state of the boss physically in a physical space and what it's actually doing. Like a boss can be in different states during a fight, but you have to observe it with your eyes. Let's say
I see. Oh yeah,
so.
there is
I
actually a boss
also
like that in
remember.
Granblue too.
I remember when you get to the post or the second half of Fantasian, the most useful character is Ez, like the whiz kid, because he's the one with your buffs.
Yep.
Yeah, I was like saying there's a boss similar to that, like in Granblue, we had to pay attention to its state, even though it's in a mobile game. But you look at this boss, he has 3 faces. It's sad, angry, or happy. And based on the face it does, it's like it gets a buff on what it does. If it's angry, it gets an attack buff. If it's sad, it gives a debuff to your characters. And you're trying to change the face of the statue by using a summon. Every time you use a summon, it forces the statue to rotate to a different face, and it gives it a different buff. I guess that's a way to pay attention, you
Mhm.
know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess this sounds like the same. I think this game is definitely up my alley with the way you describe it. Is there
Yeah.
like things that you hope to see in the PC port, like any enhancements, or just leave the game as it is? It's perfect, or something. I don't know.
I mean, just graphical options, performance options, kind of like
I played this on an Apple 4K TV, which I think
Yeah.
was new at the time, and it's still like it chugged at times. It's like, well,
Oh,
this
we
is
I
yeah,
think
it did not perform very well. So
I don't know if you ran into it, but I remember when I played through it that I actually had a lot of crashes on the Apple TV version. Like it crashed like 5 or 6 times. It was like really surprising.
So yeah, it was one of those weird things also because there's like a new like a new Apple TV and an old Apple TV, and it, was it one of those things where like it was more unstable on the new Apple TV or something?
I don't know. I've only ever had the one Apple TV, so I wouldn't be able to say.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what that because there's like a certain versions of Apple TV where like it was unstable. Like for me, like it ran pretty stably. Like like the performance wasn't like really amazing or anything. It ran smoothly enough, but not ideal, obviously. But it was I'm trying to remember that it was one of those weird ass things of like compatibility and shit. Like
I played it on an iPhone.
which is probably more powerful than the Apple TV.
yeah, actually
Yeah,
true.
I didn't have any crashes.
It's like works on my machine.
My machine is an iPhone playing it
Yeah.
good.
Damn, I use my mobile phone to play gotcha games.
But
Sad.
yes, more people should play Fantasian. They should find a way to fucking make more people play Fantasian. That's the that's the main message.
So going over into the two announcements from ChinaJoy 2023, we did once again get another look at a game that's been on our list for a long time. I don't know how high up on the list, but on the list, and that is Lost Soul Aside. So this is the game that was announced back in like what 2016 or so,
Earlier
2017.
than that,
Really?
must have been 2014.
Oh, really? Okay. Our earliest news post looks like it's from 2017, but it probably existed before we covered it. Just like in
Yeah.
it's an early because back when it was like a 1 or 2 person project, right?
Yeah.
Uh, this is the game that has a protagonist and even just like a general art and combat style that is very evocative of Final Fantasy 15, or you could potentially say Final Fantasy versus 13. So it's been in development a long while. It's had multiple periods of like going dormant and coming back. It did get both a trailer and kind of like a half-hour gameplay presentation at ChinaJoy 2023. Um, the trailer is not that good, in my opinion. It's about
Damn.
90 seconds long, and like the last half of the trailer is just kind of like the death animation of like this giant watery Jin boss. It shows this the main character. I forget if he has a name or not. Defeating this like Jin of some sort, and then the boss dying in a final animation, and that's like 40 seconds of the trailer is the boss dying, and that's it. But I say that with there's of course like 30 minutes of actual gameplay footage as well. So how good or bad the trailer is might not actually matter. So, still no information at all for like release window or anything other than it's still listed for PlayStation 5 and PC simultaneously or otherwise. I don't think we quite know. It's being published
I
by
think
Sony.
maybe it's. I don't remember if this is revealed now or last year, but it's no longer coming to PS4. Like
Oh,
it's
right.
been in development
Oh
for so
yeah, it's
long that
PS5
it
and PC
was.
now.
The
So
PS5
Yeah.
exclusive.
Well, it's also coming to PC, but
Yeah.
it's all right. I have a question. What comes
Okay.
out first? Lost Soul Aside or Relink?
I put my money on Relink.
Relink,
Alright.
not even
All
a
right.
question at this point.
Not even. It's like I
You
played
never
it,
know,
okay?
you
I
never
played
know.
it, and it has to be Relink. I played
Being-
one, and the other theoretically might be playable, but we
There's
don't
a
know.
bunch of. This is sort of the feeling that I got, and on Twitter, replies to our tweet seems to be similar, in that these China Joy or like China Hero Project games, a lot of them just take a while, and more cynically, some of the comments we get on Twitter are like, all these games are vaporware. Like none of them actually exist. Because there were games like AI Limit, which I know was like a Nier Automata lookalike, and a few others. And it just feels like none of them ever release. So Lost Soul Aside is kind of in that bucket where it's just like there's a lot of these Chinese developed action RPGs revealed at these events, and I'm trying to think of if any of them have actually come out yet. I think there was one that
The
was
Anno Mutation M.
Yeah.
yeah, that was
Mutation M.
one. And then there was one with the there was a side scroller one. I'm trying to remember what it was called.
What was that?
What's
roguelike?
what's Hardcore Mecha one of the ChinaJoy or the China Hero projects? I don't have a list in front of me. We used to have a list.
I remember like James showed me like this was it this Kickstarter funded like roguelike that has a Chinese development studio. I'm not sure. Trying to
Yeah,
remember
but
the name.
that's not. We're talking about like titles specifically under the China Hero project, like under Sony's not prerogative. Their okay, here
Initiative.
we initiative.
Okay,
Here
then
we
I'm
go.
thinking the wrong thing then.
Yeah, so we have Fist, Forge and Shadow Torch.
Oh, that was what I was thinking of. Fist.
Yeah, Hardcore Mech was
I called
also
it a
part of
side
it.
scroller. So
Trying to think what else. I think those are the only ones that came out of that are out there. Those three. I know Mutation M, Fist, and Hardcore Mecha. I'm looking at the other ones, and I don't seem to. Well, I guess Boundary came out last year. I don't remember what Boundary was. Apparently, that came out. And yeah, so I mean, a good chunk of these titles have come out. I mean, it's just depends on the scope and the development team. Like I wouldn't really call this like vaporware. It's just like they do show us like updated builds of the game that clearly someone is playing them. It's just
I think it's literally just like we have a tiny development team, so it's going to take a while.
yeah, and depending on like what kind of scope they're going for as well, what the going. So it'll probably release before I die. I don't know. Technically,
That's a hope.
let's hope.
Well, then we could kind of use that kind of conversation, that through line, for the next game we're going to talk about. This is a new game that was announced at ChinaJoy 2023. Well, at least it was formally announced. I don't know if it existed like in the like developers like internal, or I'm not exactly sure if this is just kind of like, hey, now we're partnering with Sony at this point, or if this game was known within the Chinese video game space before then. But this RPG, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, is called DaBa Land of Water Scar. DaBa is DABA. So DaBa Land of Water Scar. So this also had like a 2-minute trailer and then like a gameplay presentation at China Joy 2023. And without any hesitation, I can say this is a Souls-like. Like, it very, very clearly looks like it's borrowed from so many other games in a very similar movement feel, art style, even some of the UI that they show in the gameplay footage, etc. So it has kind of a feel of like the Wolong style of like the martial arts sort of flow
Yeah,
to
it's
it,
under that's
rather
that's
than
what
like the
it's
Gothic
yeah.
fantasy, Tolkien-esque Dark Souls or Demon Souls-esque. It looks interesting enough. No announced. It's being obviously published by Sony under the China Hero Project. So it's announced for PS5, but no window at all. And based on the precedent of other titles that of similar nature that we've seen, likely going to be cooking for a while. So we'll kind of
Yeah,
keep this on the.
this is developed by Dark Star, and they've previously worked on Sinner's Sacrifice for Redemption.
that's one of those games I've heard of, but if you ask me to describe it, I don't know. I just heard
Yeah,
it. The title
yeah.
rings a bell.
So that came out several years ago. That's their
But
new
at least
project.
I guess comparing this, like the Lost Soul Aside is being developed by AltaZero Games, and that's sort of like their first game, like a debut project.
Yeah.
Small team. Or this one at least is like, okay, this is not a debut project. This developer has at least released one game before, so it's kind of a little bit of a different context there.
Oh, I remember the Sinner Sacrifice for Redemption. If I remember right, this was one of the ones that was like exclusive to the. I hope I get this right. It was exclusive to the Discord store for a bit, for like the short time
Oh,
that existed.
amazing!
Maybe it
I
wasn't. I can't confirm now whether it was exclusive to the Discord store, but it did launch on the Discord store. So for like the 4 months that existed. Anyways,
huge. Rest in peace, Discord store. Always remembered.
that also reminds me, going back to our obviously Baldur's Gate 3 conversation, like Larian was hyped to get that onto Stadia. Like, oh
Oh yeah,
They did release it on Stadia for early access.
oh
oh
right.
shit.
I mean, the concept was smart. Like, hey, you get some friends, you don't need to download it. Just if you have your Stadia subscription, just log in and go. But wasn't meant to be.
It also makes more sense considering the game already has like Vulkan support on PC, so it probably wasn't that hard of a port. So.
Didn't a couple like Sega games, like like Valkyria Chronicles showed up on Stadia?
for a while.
Yeah.
Well, the
for what-
Judgment lost Judgment.
Cynically, I wonder if they're just cashing in.
Yeah, because Judgment for a while was not on PC, but it was on Stadia.
Yeah, that's right. That was so funny. Oh my god. I'm glad we had our Stadia memorial service. But it lives on in our hearts here at the Tetracast.
Do you guys still have the controllers?
I never
Never
fucking
had
had a
it.
tell though.
Yeah.
Yeah, Chow's like, yo, you still got that Stadia controller? Can I borrow it?
Yeah, basically.
That was a controller head. You can't help it.
Look, I have 6 Sega Saturn controllers, okay? That just tells you.
I'll trade you one of them for a Stadia controller. I really need one.
No way, man. I paid some guy in Germany like $300 to custom made me a wireless back in the day. There's no way I'm giving that up.
So we'll go into some of the last bits of smaller news before we close out. We have a handful of gameplay trailers that were detailed over the last week, in addition to those two from ChinaJoy. We got another trailer for the upcoming Fate Samurai Remnant. Now, I haven't been following this as closely as Josh has, but it seems like there's been a lot of different news. Like, we covered this game last week with a few interview snippets and some information out of that magazine that we talked about that was for the Fate series that's released periodically. But here is an actually uploaded second trailer for the game. Looks like some more information also came out of FGO Fest. So I haven't been like synthesizing all this together, other than the headline that I bring to mind is that apparently if you're like a completionist, this game has like over 100 hours of content in it. So I don't know if
Yeah,
that's typical for Type Moon type titles or not, or
I don't know exactly that's it's usually the usual like, hey, developers will throw out a number, usually inflated for the completion time, but they're saying there's going to be a lengthy game and like an average playthrough is like maybe 40 to 50 hours, which is longer than I thought it'd be. And then they're saying if you want to be a completionist, obviously it'll go way above that. So I don't know exactly I don't know what they mean by that. That is, from everything they've showed, I thought it'd be more like a 25 to 30 hour experience, but that's just me. I have no idea how big this game is. Obviously, yeah. I mean, we talked about Kakulin and Tamamo Arya showing up as like neutral rogue servants in the game. There's more following up. Like, hey, they released a little bit more info because that's that they showed at the Fate Samurai Remnant stage event at FGO Fest, but then at the main FGO Fest 8th anniversary event, they also had a brief Fate Samurai Remnant showcased, like with a new trailer. That trailer showed off more of these rogue servants. Like we have an unnamed, unidentified rogue saber that's like in white samurai armor. It almost looks like an Oni mask over it. It has a really cool design. They showed off Rogue Archer, and people who've played like Fate Grand Order know that that's Arjuna from that game. Really, really cool servant to have show up in this game. Definitely a fan favorite. So I'm sure a lot of people want Karna in the game as well for Arjuna showing up because these two guys are very, very popular in the Fate fandom. They showed off another character, Rogue Berserker. I'm not exactly sure. It's unidentified. Very muscular dude with like neon green hair. Has a pretty peculiar design. They showed off silhouettes for Roguecaster and Rogue Assassin in this game, and based on their silhouettes, people who play Fate Grand Order, it's very heavily implied based on their silhouettes and the way they're posing. Roguecaster may be Cersei from there, and then Rogue Assassin may be Li Shuen. So they might be showing up in this game. And then they also teased that Gilgamesh might probably show up in Fate Samurai Remnant at the end of the trailer, based on like kind of the golden kimono robe and the very iconic voice that Gilgamesh has. So he might show up in the game in some form. Then they also showed off some of like the more like non-combat gameplay elements as well, like kind of like this whole map grid based thing called the Spirit Font Conflict. When Adam told me that, I was like, "What the fuck are you talking about? A Spirit Font Conflict?" I was like, "Yeah, that's what they said." I'm like, "Oh, I guess it's I guess so." 'Cause I didn't read anything. I was like, I just look at the visuals. I was like, just can you guys just like just skim over this to see if it's correct? I'm just like, what the fuck is Spirit Font Conflict? So that was great. Other than that,
the dweeb that
long
shows
story
the Fate.
short, basically all last weekend they were kind of like there was that event, that fake and Odorfest, kind of showing bits of the game in different spots. And then on Monday, kind of after everything had wrapped up, Koei Tecmo sends out the press release and basically wraps it all up. Like, all right, here's all the info. So that's why we didn't talk about it. We didn't get all this last week because we were like right in the middle of it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
What are you saying?
Like
Brian?
Gilgamesh is like the dweeb that shows up at the very end of the first show. He's a very strange English
Yeah.
voice.
He's a major antagonist in like Fate's Day Night, the very first where most people were introduced to him, like who played that game or watched the anime. So yeah, so he's a pretty popular reoccurring character throughout that whole series. Wouldn't be a surprise for him to show up. And yeah, I mean that's just kind of like just what else we know for now. Like that's just coming out. Wow, this is all coming out next month. So almost there. Really want to play it. Almost there.
Also coming out just in a couple days, honestly, is Atlas Fallen. So this is the game of it's a semi-open world desert themed RPG from Deck 13. So this has been kind of in its late marketing cycle for a while now. It's been having a handful of trailers. It got 2 new trailers this week, and I hate to sound like so judgmental, but both of them I kind of watch and I'm like, this is a bit strange. The first trailer is a trailer called Lord of the Sands, but it is a very comedic trailer. It almost feels like something out of the 90s, like where they don't really treat it seriously. And I'm not saying like they have to treat, video games or serious business or whatever, but it's just the tone is just very interesting. Where a gameplay aspect of Atlas Fallen is that you like surf across the sand. It's one of the like a powers given to the player from the equipment that they wear. Only they play it up like, wait, surfing, and then they do like Beach Boys shit or whatever, and it's just like it's just a strange trailer. It's I don't know if it's funny. Maybe I just don't have the right sense of humor. But then another trailer was also uploaded. I don't know if this is uploaded to the official channel or is only on. I have the IGN link here with the IGN's YouTube channel called Advanced Gameplay Trailer. And I'm like, all right, maybe this is what I want. This is maybe what the gameplay nerd in me wants. But for calling itself an advanced gameplay trailer, it's 47 seconds long.
Is it advanced?
Very advanced.
It's,
So
it's,
advanced, you don't need
mo-
much.
it's mostly just like a montage of just, yep. And the top comment on it is, this most certainly looks like a video game. And I kind of agree. It's like, and I'm like, all right. Like, and that's kind of how I feel about Atlas Fallen right now. I was like, all right, that's coming out. Like, I guess it's an okay time for it for people who are playing, games on console. This could be good potentially. We'll talk about it when it comes out.
Was it actually advanced though? Where they show you off advanced stuff?
They showed off aerial combat, momentum, which is like the game's one like signature mechanic, and then hit weak points.
Dang, that's advanced.
Yep.
That's
So
huge.
for me.
Oh, I missed parry to stun. That's actually kind of not too bad, the parry system. But yeah,
Okay.
momentum is like the system for like how you get stronger the longer the fight goes on, which could be interesting. But then like aerial fighting and hit weak points. Oh, neat.
Advanced.
Not a trailer, but we did get some information from Koei Tecmo and Team Ninja for their continuing support for Wolong Fallen Dynasty. Of course, we already knew that the game was going to get 3 DLCs. The 3 DLCs were already dated from like the Steam page, had already kind of given like months for each of the 3 DLCs, months and titles, I believe. But now we kind of have a formal roadmap for what's left for Wolong Fallen Dynasty in 2023. However, this roadmap doesn't really give us any real new information. It gives us some small new information, but outside of the dates of the new DLCs, not even the dates, it's still just the months. What it provides other than that is like very niche. Like in November, there will be a Neo collaboration. Like,
Let's
oh,
go.
okay. I guess that makes sense because obviously it's the same team. In September, there will be a Lies of P collaboration, which I think we already knew.
Yeah,
so
we did.
this is just the
There's
announcement
also
from
at some point there's also a Naraka Blade Point
right.
collaboration.
One thing that I do like about this roadmap is that pretty much every month, even if they have nothing else to say, they say it will have balance adjustments, feature improvements, and more. They list that
Oh yeah,
for
I love those
August.
things.
They list that for August, September, October, November, They don't say anything in December for feature improvements and more.
Well,
And I
well,
guess every
they're
single
not going to make any balance adjustments in December.
I don't actually get like how you can plan for balance adjustments because like what do you already have like things in mind to balance adjust like from here on out? Like I, to me, it's just like it's one of those weird things that like you're pre-planning balance adjustments on a monthly basis.
We know that this ability that we're going to introduce in DLC 2 is going to be overpowered and will balance later.
And then at the bottom of the roadmap, there's just like an arrow covering the whole thing saying bug fixes, optimization as needed. It's like, oh, that's good.
It's also I like it's just like me being an old person, but like it's just weird to have to see 2023 roadmap for a game that released in 2023 like as well.
Yeah.
You know.
And the thing is like I don't think this roadmap is a bad thing, but it's like
It's
they've already been updating the game. Obviously, one DLC is already out. I just don't think this roadmap was really needed because it doesn't provide us any information we didn't already.
It also feels sort
have.
of delayed. Like I feel
A
like this
little bit.
roadmap should have come out in April. Like, all right, we released the game. Here's the upcoming DLC and collabs that are coming out. It feels kind of weird to have released this in like late July.
Is there
when
like
the
an
game's been
active?
out.
Is there like an active Wolong community that like that still like I don't know does stuff in the game? Like I feel like Neo had like a lasting community, but I don't know about Wolong.
I mean, I can't
But
speak to the size of it, but I did play the first DLC when it came out in late June, and it was fine. It was very much what you expected. If you've played any DLC of Neo 2, or like even like Dark Souls 2, Dark Souls 3, like it's a very similar thing. Here's a new region, there's 2 new bosses, a couple new side objectives, a new boss rush, a new weapon type. Like it's exactly what you expect it to be. And it was fine. It wasn't great, it wasn't bad, it was good. And when I went to the Reddit page, because I was actually struggling on a boss. There was a boss in the new DLC that is aerial most of the time. So if you're a melee person, it's very tricky. It's a lot of movement. You can cast spells and stuff, of course, but that wasn't my play style. And then I was actually like playing this while chatting with Adam on the side, and I'm like, am I bad at the game? Do I just suck now? And then I went to the Reddit page, and pretty much everyone was struggling with this boss. I'm like, oh, okay, it's not just me. Everyone's struggling, and I eventually did win.
You're all bad.
Yeah, I was like,
Yeah, you're
everyone's
better
bad
than
at
the rest.
Yeah, but
That's
did,
what we get for saying that the main game was too easy.
yeah, I
That's
guess.
You're like, well, I'll show you.
But yeah, I will play the other DLCs mainly because I don't think they'll be that like usually they're like you can kind of clear them in a couple days.
Couple hours.
Yeah, unless you go to like there is like the DLC 2 does give a new difficulty level, so if you're the sort of person that clears out
Gotta
all
play
the
the
way
whole
through,
game on New Game plus mode or whatever it is.
right? Yeah, that's not me. I'm like, all right, let me just see the new content and go on because luckily
What are the balance
designed.
adjustments? Clap whatever you're using though. What then?
I will find a trainer.
I still remember the original Neo. Zach liked it a lot, and then every update he liked it less and less.
He got by the end of it he hated the game.
I think the thing is though is like I don't know how valid his criticism was because it was mostly just like I found a broken build.
And then he kept on nerfing
Koei
it.
Tecmo was just like, oh, okay, this is clearly too broken. We need to trim it down. And so Zach was just upset that his broken build is no longer broken. So
I would be one of those guys, but I wouldn't rant about it like that. It would be me and Diablo 3. That's why I hated early Diablo 3. It's like the stuff that you work so hard and it becomes useless the next day. They just fucking.
Well, I mean, Diablo 3 is a little bit different, especially if you engage with the real money auction house to fucking get there, right? If you take real money,
that was an option. Yeah, I guess, but I never played Nier, but that was the thing with Zach. I remember it very vividly because he kept renting it so much.
But yeah, so the next DLC comes out in September. I'll probably play it. Well, maybe not because September is quite packed. I'll probably play it late.
I was actually just thinking the other day how like that Cyberpunk DLC also comes out in September. Like, there's just so much in September. There's a ton.
Let's see. I think we're over to sales updates now. So one of these is not a surprise, but is good news, and one of these is a surprise and is also kind of good news. So the one that's probably not a surprise is that Tears of the Kingdom continues to sell really, really well. Based on Nintendo's Q1 results for fiscal year 2024, it has sold 18.5 million copies.
A lot.
That's a big number.
That's a small, it's a little tiny number.
Yeah.
It's okay.
A blip.
Hopefully it has legs.
I could say really.
And then in the other
So
sales
let me
update,
let me
oh,
pull
go
up.
ahead,
Let me
Adam.
pull up. How much has Breath of the Wild sold? It's like above 30 million, I believe.
Yeah,
Around,
about
it's somewhere around
almost 30 and a half, like
Now,
30.5.
conventional wisdom would say that this game won't sell as much as Breath of the Wild just because sequels rarely ever do. But let me just take a look here.
30. It'll reach 30 million. I think Tears of the Kingdom can sell 30. I think it can get there. I think the question is like how fast does it get there?
Easy.
Breath of the Wild
It's-
is 30.65, so just about 30 million.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it's not a matter of if Tears of the Kingdom can get to 30 million, but how fast it can get there.
Yeah, it doesn't matter when. The question is, did Square Enix also release their fiscal this summer too? Or
Yeah,
that's
so Square Enix released their fiscal for the first quarter as well, and the main thing is that their total sales numbers are up because of Final Fantasy 16, but their income is actually down from last year. And the reason for that is because of all the costs, of how much Final Fantasy 16 costs. So, the cynical way to look at it is they developed a huge game, it cost a lot of money, and they made a very modest profit off of it so far, which is like they actually made more money a year ago selling basically nothing because they didn't have a huge cost. So basically the hope is that, well, the finance term for this is like to amortize the cost and to put it on the record books on their finances. Now the hope at this point is that when they port this game to other platforms and updated releases and whatnot, that they've already recouped the cost of the game. It looks like you can't say for certain, but you hope that the legs are good enough to basically boost that income now that those costs are amortized. So that's my understanding of it anyway.
I mean, I guess that's at least that's okay, like pretty okay. Like you sold it as a PS5 exclusive, and to at least make some form of profit out of it, despite being a PS5 exclusive. I think it's still something. At least it could be worse. It could not. You could be losing money.
I just hope it has legs. I don't.
Oh, there we go, legs.
Did that?
I think it's pretty well established. I don't think FF16 has. I mean, it'll get a boosted sales when it comes to other platforms, but in terms of like ongoing like sales, maybe it'll get sales from like significant discounts. But I think that's it.
Damn.
I
That's
saw the Pikmin 4 in Japan sold more already than Final Fantasy 16, which it's got
Yeah.
the Nintendo branding
Yeah.
behind it. But still, that is a true statement. Make of it what you will. So,
Oh yeah, that's not a surprise. I mean, there's also just like the logistics of like there's more Switches out there than PS5s too.
yeah.
And Pikmin is a better game.
Did they mention anything about their NFTs in that report? Or-
On the little balance sheet they said they had like three. I forget the units. They had some loss in valuation of some NFT stuff, but I honestly can't. I'm not into it well enough to know how bad or good that is. So they didn't talk about it too much. It's pretty thin.
Damn.
Now the thing with Square Enix that's actually kind of tedious is that other companies like Capcom, they release their like investor Q&As like immediately after after they have their briefing. But Square Enix takes like a month. I don't know why. It just takes a month. So like a month from now, we'll get the briefing that's already taken place, I think.
Yeah.
That the actual transcription of it. I'm sure if you go online, you can probably find some like Japanese business analyst who's already like talking about what was asked at that meeting, but it's not like formalized yet. So we'll see if anyone asks what people we will see what people did ask at the investor meeting at the briefing in about a month.
So did FF16 make money?
No.
Please remaster Xenogears.
Please
If you-
remake
if you-
FF16.
If you ask about the remaster, then it exists. That's how it works.
Yeah.
Mm.
So the other sales update from this week is some good news, and that is for Remnant II, which is from Gunfire Games that we talked about on the podcast 3 weeks ago. It has sold over 1 million units in 4 days, across the Xbox, PlayStation 5, and PC. And its concurrent player numbers on Steam ended up capping out more than double the original game. So obviously a big win for Gunfire Games and Gearbox, and obviously a game that seems really well regarded that Josh and James can attest to.
Yeah, really, really great sequel. I'm really glad that it sold well. I mean, the original Remnant did eventually get to 1 million after a couple, like several, like it took a good amount of months
Mhm.
to get there. So it's selling faster, and just continuing to see success from it all around it's pretty cool to see. It's a really impressive game.
I wonder if Gunfire Games. This is really not fair of me, but I
Mhm.
wonder if I'm working under the assumption that a Darksiders 4 is going to exist. I'm wondering if Gunfire Games is on it or someone else, because they made Darksiders 3.
They made
Hmm.
Darksiders 3, and they do have a lot of ex-Vigil employees.
Mm-hmm.
They're gonna make a Darksiders 4, but it's gonna be more like Remnant.
Yep.
So you just play as the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, but it's a third-person shooter now. Or it's gonna be like Baldur's Gate. It's gonna be a CRPG.
I mean, it's the new hotness.
Hell yeah!
We'll go into some some release dates now. So Lost Eidolons will finally head to consoles on August 24th for both PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X.
Scott reviewed this last year when it released on PC, and he basically said it's pretty good. I specifically remember one of his criticisms was that like it's a tactical RPG, but then whenever the game like zoomed in close and showed like the character models and animations, he was like, "Wow, the animations here aren't great." But it's sort of an indie scale game. I just have to have that expectation. But he thought it was pretty all right. It's like a Fire Emblem like.
Yeah, whenever I look at the battle scenes for this game, it reminds me of an Xbox game called Kingdoms Under Fire, and the way it frames like big like that game had like how it framed big battles in between troops.
Mhm.
It sort of had like that sort of similar flair with like heavily armored troops like bashing their heads into one another. Hell yeah!
We have an indie turn-based RPG called Virgo versus the Zodiac is releasing on pretty much all consoles on August 23rd. This game did originally release on Steam a few years back in December 2019, so just in the before times. So it looks like the Steam results of this game were pretty positive, 92%. And, so now Serenity Forge, which took over publishing, and developer Moon Nana is bringing the game to pretty much every console: Xbox One,
For what
Xbox
it's
Series,
for what it's
PS4,
worth,
and
I think the
Switch.
developer of Munana is basically like two people.
Right.
It's like a
Yeah,
creator and like an artist or something.
and
So
then there's as mentioned in the original post, there's kind of one of those turn-based battles that's kind of like Mario and Luigi and Mother, where they're like in the middle of battle you can like react to stuff like dodge out of the way, counterattack in real time, like
Mhm.
that. So an active turn-based sort of deal.
Gothic Classic is arriving on Nintendo Switch on September 28th. This
This
was
one's really
the
funny. This one's really funny. Go
what's
for it.
really funny.
Wait, finish your news. Sorry.
I was just gonna say that this was like kind of that out of nowhere tease and announcement, like back in March, where they were putting, I forget, how do they tease it? They were like tweeting like Switch icons on their little page saying like,
they're just like, "Happy New Year! Here's a screenshot from Gothic for no reason," and it had like Switch icons on it. You're like, "Huh, okay."
Yeah, like there's like a straight up port of the game. It's like minor graphically touched up, but it's pretty much like the original source code and like the original visuals of the game. There's no like obviously it's not a remake because they're making there's a separate Gothic remake, Gothic 1 remake in
right.
production somewhere. But then it's like not like there's not even like a remaster sorts of deal. It's not drastically like visually.
It kind of
It's very
reminds me of
identical.
those Dark Alliance games, and the Dark Alliance games were re-released.
Yeah,
It was, and I honestly don't mind this really. They're
me
just like,
too.
"Hey, we're just gonna re-release these games so you can play them on modern platforms," And they're coming from this is coming from THQ Nordic, so they could do a remaster if they wanted to, I guess. But some of these re-releases, like the Dark Alliance games, it was more just like, "Hey, we're making this game still available on modern platforms with just the most basic usability touch-ups just to like make sure it runs, but that's about it.
Yeah,
So
and props to them because like aside from like having overhauling the UI for like the Switch, like they just make it like controller friendly on the heads up display. They published like a list of like bug fixes and it's like a fucking shitload. It's like I just like linked to it and it's like on the article and it's like, yep, that's definitely a lot of fixes. All right. Yes.
yeah, Gothic is. We've talked about this before. I've never played it, but I know a lot of people, especially like in Europe, when this game came out in the early 2000s, was a sort of a formative, well-regarded PC RPG at the time.
Yeah.
Kind of like there hadn't really been a game like that before in the 90s. So
Well,
seminal in
2001.
that regard. I said early 2000s. What did I? What
Oh,
did,
so, well,
yeah, that's
okay.
that's when the game came out.
Mm.
So I was just saying, like in the 90s, didn't really have PC RPGs quite like this. So I know it's really well regarded in that era, in that area. So so much so that they're making a remake. And I know they had the demo for the remake, or like the test or whatever they called it. And I know a lot of people were not very happy with it because it didn't have the same flavor or whatever as the original. But they're still making it. We'll see how that turns out.
That's why they're taking something. They're like, all right, we need to change.
Yeah, we're like, shoot, we need
quite
to
a bit.
make sure that we don't upset the Gothic fan base. So
All
I want to play
200
it at
of them.
some point, but there's so many games I want to play.
One last dated announcement. This is just kind of a fun, cute one. An indie RPG called Battle Cakes will be launching on PC on October 26th. This looks like an RPG where you play literally as like cupcakes. Like there, I see like in our header image of this game, there's a cupcake with a crossbow. I'm like, hell yeah!
Oh yeah.
So this game just looks really cute and fun. So
Okay, Buttercup.
during one of the financial briefings last week, I believe, for EA, it was kind of inadvertently announced that they are working on porting Star Wars Jedi Survivor to PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. And I hope I'm attributing this to the right person, but I believe I saw James say, like, wait, they're porting the game that doesn't run on current consoles to last gen?
Yeah.
Am I
Yeah.
attributing-
It could have been me. It could have been the 1,200 other people that said that on Twitter.
That's fair. So, yeah. So Xbox One trying to run Star Wars Jedi Survivor. I guess we will see.
Dude, I can't wait for the Digital Foundry video for this fucking thing. I don't understand. I don't get it. Good luck, Godspeed, whoever's
I wonder if they're just their media analysis, market analysis. They just decided there's actually a good number of people who will buy this, so they decided it's worth doing, I suppose.
I think the real reason why this is happening is the next Switch, because it's probably going to be about as powerful, or maybe a bit more powerful than the PS4 and an Xbox One. So it's like, well, if you can get it running on last gen, you can have it be like a launch title for the next Nintendo console, and that's like a lot of marketing.
But did Fallen Order come out on the Switch?
No.
Oh, okay.
I think
I'm
he's
just
saying
saying
that they do the work to downport it to these consoles, and then they can immediately leverage
Oh, so
that
it's like a proof of concept
for
almost.
Switch 2. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess we'll see how that shakes out.
I mean, at worst case, you can say, hey, now this game is available, and there's like 120 million PS4s out there or whatever. So all they got to do is put it on the shelf. People say, oh, Star Wars, and they buy it, and hopefully it runs adequately. There you go.
I'm like thinking now. I'm like thinking like what next gen exclusive thing could makes for an interesting like last gen port, like Baldur's Gate 3, for example. Like, yeah, we're gonna try to get that running on PS4.
Did the Hogwarts Legacy came out on the Switch yet?
Didn't it eventually get canceled?
I don't
Did
know.
it get
I don't know.
canceled?
I have no idea.
I've not been following that game.
Did they? Oh God, I'm thinking about what they did for Marvel's Midnight Suns. Did those last gen ones ever come out, or were they canceled too? I forgot. I know they delayed those. I don't know if they just canceled them eventually, or they did come out. It's been a long time.
Yeah, I'm looking.
trying to think what else.
Midnight Suns on Switch was canned.
Okay, but the PS4 and Xbox One versions came out.
Yeah.
Okay.
As far as I can tell, with a quick Google foo.
Okay. So
The
I'm,
last
I'm,
bit of
glad,
news.
I'm glad to know that the next generation of video game consoles has started by releasing exclusives and then eventually putting them back on old systems.
Well, at least you don't have the weird Baldur's Gate situation where they have trouble doing the Series S development. It's a PS5 exclusive for the time being because of having one of the ports having issues.
I've actually
It's one
really
of those
enjoyed.
things.
Go ahead, James.
It's got to be one of those things where it's like, well, it's a happy accident in a way, because it's like, well, now they don't have to go up against Starfield, because it's like, well, we're not doing Starfield, or we're not doing it on Xbox, I should say.
I have really enjoyed Larian's the way that they've handled the Xbox situation. It's very honest. They're like, hey, we're not announcing it for Xbox. We're working on it for Xbox, but the thing we're running into is this, with no judgment or anything. They just talk about our engineers are working as hard as we can to get the split screen working for Baldur's Gate 3 on Xbox One S. And hopefully we can get it to work, but we're not announcing anything. So I think that they've just been very clear with their communication
Yeah,
about that.
they're very frank with it.
We do not have an exclusivity contract. We would release it if we can get it to work to our standards, but that's what we're currently working on.
Hopefully they get there.
Last bit of news we have here is something to look forward to discuss likely next week, is that Koei Tecmo and Gust will be announcing a new Atelier title in just a few days on August 8th. Do we have any does anyone more like finger on the pulse of this series, like know kind of what we're expecting here, or is it kind of, now that the Rise of Trilogy is out of the way, now that the Marie the remake is out of the way, that this is going to be just like, new protagonist, new trilogy?
Rise of 4.
Yep.
I don't know.
There we go.
I just assume it's gonna be the start of a new arc for Atelier. I do wish there was more non-Atelier Gust games. I mean, there's a
Blue
very
Reflection free, okay? Blue Reflection free.
I mean, like, just start something new again that's not tied to an IP, unless you want another fairy tale RPG. Chow, I know you were very hot on.
No.
When are they going to localize the? When are they going to localize the Seal No Surge and R No Surge?
Yeah, that is true too. Like that is so weird that they just re-released them, and it's like, yeah, just like last time, you will not localize them. It's like, what the fuck?
The worst part is you can't even buy it on Steam if like you're not in Japan. You can't even like
region locked. Yeah. Ugh. That has been that has been. I forgot that was a situation until you just reminded me. Like, oh yeah, that happened. What the fuck?
They're gonna pull a spin out of nowhere. A Mana Cremia remake.
I mean, they said this will be an Atelier title, so unless it's gonna be like something like some weird fucking spin-off, like a one-off thing, that would still be a new Atelier title. Like that anniversary Atelier, right? The one that like had a crossover between all the antagonists. I forgot what it's called.
What was the Muso game with that Atelier cast? Was there one?
No, there's Warriors All Stars.
There was a Koei Tecmo like Muso one.
Yeah, Warriors All Stars. That was the one that like had the crossover between all the Koei Tecmo shit. Like
I think it had Sophie in it.
Yeah, William Neo was in there.
Damn, they even got the first weeaboo.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of like other casters. Yeah, the Dynasty Warriors, Samurai Warriors representatives in there. I don't know what else they had. Oh, they had Ninja Gaiden, Ryu Hayabusa in there.
Kind of outplays. Consider all those games are like a fucking bloodbath, and you bring Atelier characters in there.
But yeah, we'll look forward to that next week. Next week we'll talk about further experiences with Baldur's Gate 3 likely. Next week, I think we can finally talk about Atlas Fallen because it releases, right? When does that come out? Like the 10th?
Like that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
All right, so that'll come out this week, and we'll talk about it next week.
Brian has been dying to talk about it.
It's kind of. It's just a weird game the way that it was announced. Had a release date before, had any gameplay, then it got the gameplay, then they got the release date delayed, and yeah. So But yeah, you can follow RPG Site at rpgsite.net. We're on all the 4 social media networks. The network formerly known as Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. Just search for RPG Site and you should be able to find us, hopefully. You can also join our Discord, discord.gg/RPG Site, or hit the link at the top of our homepage. You can listen to this podcast on Spotify, Google Podcasts, and iTunes. And we will be back next week with another episode of the Tetracast. So until you hear from us next time, stay safe and take care. And we'll talk to y'all later.
If you have a Stadia controller you're not using, reach out to Chow in the comments. Go in the comments like, hey, Chow, I have a Stadia controller I'm not using. You can
I'll
have
get a
it.
good penny for it.
It's a historical artifact.